Hello?
The Zanpakto.
Hi guys, it's me, my Fredo. Ah man, hasn't it been a little bit of a while since I've done a Bleach video? We have done the Bount arc, we have done the Bakoto arc, and so now, it's time to do the next two filler arcs, major filler arcs. Yes, I want to do two birds with one stone for a very particular reason. We are doing the Zanpakto Rebellion arc and comparing it to the Reigai Arc, or the Gote 13 invading army arc, which I don't like that name as much. And we are comparing these because through my time watching Bleach, I have always been uncertain which one is best. Never quite decided if I like the Reigai arc more or the Zanpakto Rebellion arc. I know the general consensus is that the Zanpakto Rebellion arc is the best Bleach filler arc, but for me, I have some problems with it, and especially rewatching, I actually do like the Reigai arc a lot more than I did on my first watch. For many years, probably for the past 5 or 6 years, I have been completely stumped by this question: which Bleach filler arc is better, the Zanpakto Rebellion arc or the Reigai arc? What is the best Bleach filler arc? Tell me in the comments what you think. Let me know if your opinion has changed or not from the beginning to the end of this video. I'm still undecided, so in as many categories as I can. So first of all, what we need is a summary, so let's jump into it. Oh, Scooby-Doo! Alright. The Bount arc was split into two distinct halves. The Bakoto arc was two separate plot lines that joined together partway through. These two arcs, I feel like it happens in waves. So while I summarize, I'm going to categorize them into 3 acts, Act 1, 2, and 3, and then split those into 2 different parts. And it fits pretty well that way. Firstly, let's just begin with the intro. Let's talk about the first 2 episodes in a little bit more detail so we can get an idea of the first impression these arcs make. The Zanpakto Rebellion arc opens with a friendly match between Renji and Byakuya, who we've both seen develop throughout the series, Renji more so power-wise and Byakuya more character-wise, so it's really nice to see them escalating in a friendly fight, with squad mates cheering them on. And it gives us the perfect opportunity for foreshadowing the end of this episode, where Zenbon-Zakura Kageyoshi nicks Byakuya, even though it's supposed to have the safe zone. People are like, oh, what's wrong, Captain? You seem a little bit off. But he keeps it to himself. We hear Rangiku, Momo, and Isane complaining that the Zanpakto spirits have been ignoring them recently. At nightfall, the Captain-class Soul Reapers are all summoned urgently to Sokyoku Hill. That's right, this filler arc starts at Sokyoku Hill instead of ending on it. And I must say the presentation here is really good. It almost feels like the setup of a movie. And this is our first Bleach episode to be widescreen, and they did a great job with the composition, so I want to give it kudos for that. This edgy figure that feels like it's riffing a little bit off of Ukiura, especially with the tears, because sometimes he cries blood, a bit like Ukiura's black lines. Anyway, this edgelord we have over here, who does look cool, and I do like him a lot, but he does come off that way. Muramasa controls, or mind controls its own wielder, makes it bloodlusted and makes it kill innocents, so it's a really good name. Keep that in mind. Muramasa introduces himself and says that head captain Yamamoto is gone. Chojuro Sasakibe has already been injured, and Komomura jumps at the opportunity to strike Muramasa out of anger and loyalty to Yamamoto. But Tenken strikes at Komomura himself instead of his enemy. And then it's revealed that the Zanpakto spirits are free and rebelling against their wielders, just like the name of the arc. Komomura is then taken out of the fight, and all hell breaks loose. The Soul Reapers have lost their Bankai and Shikai, and they scatter, and fights break out as they flee. Byakuya gets smashed into a building by his own Bankai, and he's presumed dead for now. And Rukia escapes the Soul Society and is received by Urahara and Ichigo's people. Ichigo decides to act and go into the Soul Society with Yoruichi. And Ichigo has his own complicated powers with his hollow stuff, and Old Man Zangetsu and White Zangetsu. And Yoruichi, we don't know her Zanpakto. So it is kind of interesting that these two characters are going in, because might they be safe? Might we see something cool? Oh, we don't know. What's going to happen with their powers? I'd say Act 1 goes from 230 to 240, and the first half of that goes up to 235. So next 3 episodes, there's initial fighting. Mayuri is experimenting on himself, and everyone else is missing. That part in their soul body is the Zanpakto spirit, and it's actually left their soul bodies and manifested independently without the Soul Reapers being fully aware until now. Yes, this is for real, guys. Rukia fights Sodeno Shiayuki. It's kind of like the emotional height of the Soul Reaper and Zanpakto spirit interactions for the entire arc in like episode 3. The claim by the Zanpaktos are that they heard Muramasa's voice, questioning why they are so subservient, and preys on their gripes of their wielders. Rukia accepts this and apologizes to Sodeno Shiayuki, and accepts that she wants to be independent. Sodeno Shiayuki seems to snap into caring about her again for a moment. Muramasa shows up and expresses disappointment at Sodeno Shiayuki, viewing her as crawling back to her abusive owner or something like that. He's very anti-establishment, I suppose. Muramasa reveals himself to be a Zanpakto also, then takes interest with the Ichigo. The next few episodes are cool, but won't fully explore Ichigo's inner balance, with Ichigo versus Muramasa, Ichigo versus Old Man Zangetsu, Zangetsu versus Zangetsu, Holified Ichigo versus Old Man Zangetsu, White Zangetsu versus Muramasa, as he can go into Ichigo's inner world, and all that stuff like that. Seems all the Zanpakuto have these small or big issues with their wielders and have joined Muramasa because of this, but only because Muramasa called them to rebel. They wouldn't have really done it independently. But supposedly, they only join him because they all do have these genuine issues. Like Sodeno Shiayuki feels like she's being taken for granted, which Rukia apologized for and sincerely says that she has never taken her for granted. Old Man Zangetsu, which shouldn't that be White Zangetsu and not Old Man? I thought it calls forward the Zanpakuto spirits. And for what we know at this point in the series, we're definitely sure that White Zangetsu is Zangetsu and Old Man Zangetsu might be Zangetsu. So this doesn't make... Oh, sorry, I forgot. We're not supposed to be criticizing, just summarizing at this point. Let's do that later. Wrap your head around that. Let me know if that makes any sense, because that doesn't make sense to me right now. Renji fights Zabimaru, Monkey and Snake. They had a redesign, and that sex change Omake joke is canonical to this arc, I guess. That's crazy.
Log. Zabimaru is a monkey, so option 4 on this page is available.
You could give him a sex change? Please do this for me!
Renji actually recovers his powers by defeating his Zanpakuto spirit, and this is where we learn that Zabimaru didn't by their own volition rebel against Renji. They were brainwashed, apparently. So the reasons the Zanpakuto give might be legitimate issues, or might only be small nags. They give out the small nag as the explanation because they're brainwashed, and they're not going to be like, oh, we're rebelling because Muramasa says so. They just give the only thing they can kind of think of. So we don't know how much legitimate issues the Zanpakuto spirits have with their wielders. So that kind of gets pushed out the side as soon as this revelation happens. That, don't worry guys, they're just they actually don't mind how they're treated. So we don't really get them solving internal issues within their soul, like with Rukia and a little bit like with Ichigo, because now they're just brainwashed. Kind of the height of the exploration of that dynamic is now gone in the first part. So the subtlety of this arc has sort of vanished. Anyway, let's get to more fights. Part 2 of Act 1, 236 to 240. There's a few more fights. Somebody breaks into the part of the Seirete, and Ichigo goes to try and chase them off or find them, and he gets attacked by Senbonzakura Kageyoshi, and we get this cool callback to Byakuya versus Ichigo, like this little bit here. Ichigo has a sneaking suspicion that wasn't Byakuya's Zanpakuto spirit doing that. It was actually Byakuya, so he might still be alive. Very interesting. Then we move into the forest of the Rukongai, where there's some more fights. There's a fight with Omaida and Gegetsu Buri, Hyorimaru versus Toshiro, which is pretty cool. And we get a bit of a focus on Hinako and Tobi Yume, Momo's and Rangiku's Zanpakuto. They squabble, and it's a little obnoxious. They do that for the whole arc, even though here they get bested by Momo and Rangiku teaming up, and then they get captured. They get broken out. So I feel like those two Zanpakuto spirits are kind of annoying, and they get beaten and have plenty of screen time here, but they show up in the rest of the arc also, which is a little annoying. Ichigo does manage to track down Muramasa, but Byakuya jumps in and protects Muramasa and protects his Zanpakuto spirit, and he's alive, but he's sided with the rebellion. Oh no! And he's doing it, why? To uphold his self-respect. And I would agree with Byakuya for siding with the rebellion, or at least respect it, if it was a genuine rebellion, but it's not. It's brainwash. Yeah, it's brainwashing. Muramasa has some sort of illness or debilitation, where he coughs and like cries of blood, and he can't use his powers, it interrupts him. But either way, Byakuya's there to back him up, and they escape back to the cave. This is not a particularly exciting part of the arc, especially now we know it's mind control. So Act 2, I would say, is episode 241 to 248, and the first half probably goes up to those first 5 episodes of this to 245. Byakuya is in the Zanpakto Rebellion hideout, destroys Rukia's Zanpakto Sodeno Shirayuki to prove his loyalty. The stakes are raised, and we are angry at Byakuya again, and we haven't had that since episode 59.
To kill my enemy.
He does this as the brainwashed Zanpakto are very, very apprehensive and distrustful of any Soul Reaper working with them. We find out that if anybody destroys a Zanpakto spirit that is not their own, it is destroyed for good. The only reason why Ichigo and Renji got their powers back is because they destroyed their own Zanpakto spirit. The fact that Byakuya breaks Sodeno Shirayuki supposedly means that Rukia, who was the most empathetic and was willing to give up Sodeno Shirayuki, is the one to actually lose her. And it's done by her brother. So this makes us real mad at Byakuya. Say, Byakuya, what the heck are you doing, Byakuya? This arc is kind of the Zanpakto spirits are unique and their own persons. Most Soul Reapers mistreat them, and instead of being one with them, and there's sort of like this tool and owner situation. And the dehumanized and abused Zanpakto rise up to fight for better treatment. And actually, all of their legitimate complaints aren't legit because the slaves are actually fine with their situations and have just been brainwashed to rebel. Oh, right, I did it again. Byakuya then shows up at Squad 6 and reveals his betrayal, shows Rukia that he destroyed Sodeno Shirayuki, and Renji gets real mad, for real. We have an incredible dual fight scene here. I know I've been ragging on this arc a bit, but this is such a great part of the arc and a great part of Bleach. Byakuya and Renji fight each other, and while that's going on, their Zanpaktos are fighting at the same time elsewhere. And these are both incredible fights. Now, Renji versus Byakuya is really cool, and Renji decides to sort of experiment with his Kido because he doesn't have his Shikai or Bankai. He's not good with Kido, but he tries to use it in a more experimental way, like Momo does in Fate Karakura, but he sucks at it, so it doesn't work very well. But it does throw off Byakuya, and it switches up his style, which they're so used to, and that is even established at the beginning of this arc in the episode 1, in like the first scene, where they fight each other using Shikai and then escalating to Bankai. And so this is such a great payoff within the arc itself, and it's just great to see in general another Renji versus Byakuya fight. And this one isn't a friendly one, it's like kind of the other side of the coin of the beginning friendly match. But their fight is actually the lesser of the two, even though as great as it is. Zabimaru versus Zenbon Sakura is one of the best fights in all of Bleach. The choreography and animation is excellent, but the choreography especially brilliant. Oh, it is so good. Oh man. What follows this is the Soul Reapers and Zanpakto spirits converging on this spot. We have some good fights, we have some middle fights, we have a few bad fights, little short ones, and here we get a lot of lieutenants, and we get Ikaku also, Yumichika fighting their Zanpakto spirits. This bit's kinda crazy, am I right, guys? Wabisuke dies when Kenpachi Zaraki shows up, because he's another wild card, because he doesn't know his Zanpakto spirit, like with Yoruichi. It's another wild card, but in a different way. But he does show up, he's not there initially, so we kind of have an excuse why he wasn't there. Maybe his Zanpakto didn't get the mind control. This is a filler arc, so they can't reveal any big new stuff with Zaraki. And he just one-shots Wabisuke, which is a bit of a shame, because Wabisuke is one of my favorite. Either way, they all fight, and then they retreat after Ashisoko Chiso blows everything up and poisons some of the characters. In this sort of first part of Act 2, we do get to see Iba and Isane. They get into some action, which is pretty rare. Both characters I like and are kind of off-screen a lot. Ashisoko Chiso is also so cute. He's like a butterfly, like his Bankai is like a caterpillar baby, but the actual spirit's like this little cute butterfly that squeaks and softly screeches, and sometimes they give him like video game sound effects. Oh man, it's so great. Anyway, the Zanpakto retreat again. They're impossible to track, so the Soul Reapers just have to sit and wait for them to make the first move. Part 2 of Act 2 is the Soul Reapers manage to find the cave where Yamamoto is being held. They go in there, mostly the senior captains and Yoruichi and Ichigo. Then they are apprehended by the Zanpakto spirits, and there's more fights. We do get to see Jushiro and Shunsui fighting their Zanpakto. That's a highlight. So there's some fun character moments. Ichigo goes ahead, which is all part of Muramasa's plan, because Yamamoto wasn't imprisoned at the beginning of this arc. Instead, Yamamoto was approached by Muramasa first, recognized Muramasa because he has history with him, and knows how dangerous it is and how dangerous it would be if Ryujin Jaka was mind controlled. So he instantly puts up this barrier, and the only way to break this crazy unnamed Kido barrier is if Ichigo, in his holified state, and then Bankai hits it with Getsuga Tensho. So Muramasa like deflects Ichigo's Getsuga Tensho into Yamamoto's barrier, which blows open, and instantly Ryujin Jaka is mind controlled, and Ryujin Jaka works with Muramasa to trap the senior captains and Ichigo and Yoruichi in the cave, and they can't escape. And then he goes to the world of the living to free his original wielder, who is Koga Kuchiki. Yes, some relative of Byakuya Kuchiki, who was sealed in the world of the living by Yamamoto and Ginrei Kuchiki. The senior captain, Ichigo, can't do anything about it because they're trapped by Ryujin Jaka. But they all work together to try and hold off Ryujin Jaka, and Ichigo alone manages to break out, can go to the world of the living to pursue Muramasa. This comes to Act 3 in the world of the living. It's about 7 episodes long. Goes from 249 to 255. Oh yeah, man. Muramasa is confronted by Ichigo's friends by this lake where Koga is sealed. Zenbon Sakura, who is not mind controlled, helps free Koga, because Byakuya, when he gets smashed into that wall, that replays a bunch, and it's a big mystery in the early part of the arc. Byakuya defeats his Zanpakto spirit, and then they pretend like he didn't, and so they're basically working within the mind-controlled rebellion, but Zenbon Sakura isn't mind-controlled, and Byakuya is only there so Muramasa can set Koga free, and Byakuya can fight and kill Koga, and get rid of Muramasa and get rid of Koga in one fell swoop, because it's a stain on his family's reputation, and he's doing this to uphold self-respect, and the self-respect is tied to his clan and his family. Koga Kuchiki is a blotch on the history because of his actions. We get to that exactly here, because we get a 2-episode backstory about how powerful of a commander Koga Kuchiki is, who married into the Kuchiki family, helped out as a commander in like the civil war in the Soul Society, which is pretty crazy. We don't get to see too much of it. Either way, some jealous men frame him, put him in prison. Muramasa then breaks Koga out of prison, even though he's innocent. He breaks Koga out of prison uninitiated, so Muramasa's acting on his own. Koga doesn't like this, but he does accept this and decides to take revenge on his conspirators, and Yamamoto and Ginrei confront him and end up having to seal him because his Zanpakto powers are so powerful. He can make Zanpakto turn against them, so he makes like random squad mates turn their sword, like they can't control it, but their sword turns towards them and they stab themselves, or he can mind control the actual Zanpakto spirits also. So it's insanely overpowered. Muramasa's like, Koga, I finally freed you, it's been so long. And Koga snaps Muramasa's blade and says, you're just a tool who failed me. Where were you? I called upon you when Yamamoto and Ginrei were trying to seal me away. And then Muramasa's like, what? But you never called on me, I couldn't hear you. And I really like this bit because they have this aminosity. Koga's turmoil inside, and he's not one with his Zanpakto spirit, that there's a failure to communicate.
What we've got here is failure to communicate.
And because they fail to communicate, they're divided, they're not strong. Like Zaraki Kenpachi lost to Ichigo, well, lost, it was a tie, but he lost to Ichigo in the Soul Society. And Ichigo, which was way weaker than him, because Ichigo was fighting alongside Zangetsu, unified internally, while Zaraki was ununified. He was divided inside of himself. And it's the same thing here. Koga was divided inside of himself, so Muramasa couldn't even hear Koga, and he saw that as a betrayal. So he rejects his Zanpakto, part of his spirit, and he picks up a random tool. Byakuya confronts Koga, and then an epic battle commences, which is a massive highlight fight. It debuts some brand new filler Kido It's insane. The dialogue's pretty good. The animation and choreography are excellent. And Koga, he's just super strong, and then also has like perfect hypnosis. He has like the Aizen power on top of everything. Anyway, Byakuya beats him, and then part 2 of Act 3 ensues, where Koga is defeated, then Muramasa. Zanpakuto spirits can't naturally sustain themselves long-term without their wielder, without the other part of their soul, the Soul Reaper. And Muramasa, for years and years, has been absorbing hollows, in fact, even maybe Vastu Lorde, into his soul to sustain him. That's why he's having like this illness or debilitating like coughing and bleeding. His despair at being rejected by his master leads him to losing control to the hollow inside, and he turns into this hollow, this kind of Vasto Lorde form, and Ichigo's gang try to stop him. This big bulbous dome is created, and Ichigo and Muramasa fight inside of Muramasa's inner world, or I guess Koga's inner world. Episode 254. The Soul Society turn up and they fight random hollows outside this dome. The Soul Reapers and Zanpakuto spirits are fighting against the Garganta and Gillians, and they're just talking and saying, oh, we're talking too much. Byakuya might not be forgiven. Oh, that leads to nothing. Yeah, they kill Gillians and stand around arguing, saying there's no time to argue. It's a really bad episode, and that's the penultimate episode. At least the finale episode, where Ichigo defeats Muramasa and escapes the collapsing inner world. It's not quite as good as the other highlight fights. Some people have made the observation that it seems like they were running out of budget at this point, which kind of seems to be maybe the case. Either way, it's still pretty good. Muramasa says goodbye, saying, I hope someday I can make amends for my actions. Byakuya has protected his clan's honor and reputation, and thanks Ichigo for the second time, I guess. Koga is dead. Muramasa is free from Koga, free from that heavy weight of having to free Koga and being alone and absorbing hollows and all the despair, so he's free to be rebirthed some way, I suppose. Does Zanpakuto spirits get rebirthed, or do they just get destroyed? I'm not too sure about that. I suppose everyone gained more understanding and appreciation for their Zanpakutos. Kinda? And the Zanpakuto spirits fade away. And that's it. That's the end of the arc. That's everything that changed. That's all we get. That's all we learn from this arc. Except they don't fade away, because there's the Sword Beast filler arc for 10 more episodes. But we won't talk about that. For this arc, they fade away. That was a long recap, but you know, this is like a 20 episode thing. Next one, Reigai. How it starts, intro episodes. Episodes 317 and 318. 1 month after Aizen's defeat, people are sort of coming out of their depression. We get a lot of scenes, kind of slow scenes, showing that they're starting to warm up, cheer up, being lively again after the big battle in Fake Karakura Town. They're cleansing the battle zone and trying to fix Karakura Town. It's kind of nice and laid back. Rangiku and Nanao finish up on the cleaning project, and they go back to the Soul Society via the Garganta, which Rangiku thinks it's creepy for some reason. They sense something, and then we cut to another scene. Ichigo and Rukia are back in Karakura. Rukia's first time being established in Karakura since the first arc, which is pretty cool. She's assisting Ichigo, whose power is waning after he gave it up, defeating Aizen. And this arc exists because they say that, oh, Ichigo's powers don't go away straight away, but they will be lost eventually. It's a slower thing instead of in the manga where it's quick, so it is integrated well. There's this girl Nozomi, comes to Senkaimon into the world of the living. Rangiku and Nanao arrive late, as the time dilation is off in the Garganta. 3 hours is now 24 hours, and it's differing more and more. By tomorrow, it will be impossible to get into the world of the living. Oh no, something's happening. Kon finds Nozomi naked and takes her back home. Yep, that's what's going on over there. Mayuri and Zaraki go into the precipice world to collect data. Zaraki is oddly confrontational. They then find Ichigo's badge for some reason. It was in the Dangai, and it's in the Soul Society now, even though Ichigo still has it in the world of the living. Very strange. Very strange. And the people presenting it might already have been replaced by Reigai, because the Reigai are trying to conspire against Ichigo, saying that he's causing a disruption for some reason. Very strange. Ichigo's being framed for some... Ichigo, against Kisuke's recommendations, goes to Soul Society with Rukia. They don't expect the cleaner to have reformed since Aizen destroyed him, but it has reformed, and it chases them because the time dilation is off. And Ichigo uses Bankai speed, which is actually really cool. He uses his Bankai speed to escape the cleaner meaning because his Bankai makes him way faster. It's an awesome chase scene with great animation. Yes, Ichigo loses his badge then because the time dilation, it showed up earlier in the Soul Society before he even lost it. It's that far off. And then Ichigo is confronted by Hitsugaya and others as a material witness, and they need to take him in because, hey, there's suspicious stuff happening and the Garganta is drifting and we found your badge in it, so we're gonna arrest you. Rukia breaks him out of the prison and we get our first glimpse of Kagerosa. Back in the Soul Society, Rukia and Ichigo fight Renji and Ikaku, but there's something wrong with them. They're stronger and more aggressive. Oh my goodness, I think they've been replaced by Reigais. Oh my goodness, some of the other captains are getting suspicious and thinking that some people replaced, specifically the senior captains are suspicious. There's an imposter among us. So there is this mystery element of, ooh, something's going on and there seems to be like these replacements and how many are replaced, oh, we're not too sure. So I do like that quite a lot. Ichigo and Rukia having to fight and sneak around the Soul Society. It is actually pretty cool. Shunsui thinks Byakuya is a little bit off and is suspicious of him, but then pretends everything is fine. Unohana is also a little sussed again, and he's straining himself. The more he strains himself, the sooner he loses his Soul Reaper powers. Yoruichi stops the fight early and gets them out of there, and then explains to them that even though the spiritual pressures are exactly the same with those clones, they are actually mod soul pills within a near perfect Gigai, and she doesn't know how many of these clones, these Reigai, have penetrated the ranks of the Gotei 13. Squad 12 must be the cause of this. They then decide to infiltrate a little more stealthy-like. Rukia kills the monitor guy. They see Nozomi running through the precipice world in some notes. It says that she must be captured, and then that's when it cuts to Ichigo's house. And Kon answers the door, and Kagerosa is there and wants to be led to Nozomi, and he has Reigai Izuru and Nanao with him. Kon is like, oh yeah, come see Nozomi. Oh no, she escapes! Mostly off-screen fight against Nozomi and the Reigai, which is a little disappointing, but that's okay. Kagerosa knocks her out and disables Kon in like a factory industrial district. It's a very cool setting. That's the end of the introduction pretty much. Uryu shows up and the rest of Act 1, which I think goes up to episode 323. First part kind of ends at 320. After Uryu loses, Ichigo's friends show up with Ichigo and help him fight Kagerosa. It is an excellent fight. Oh! The first fight with Kagerosa versus Ichigo is so good. He uses his hollow mask, strains him a lot. Kagerosa manages to beat him. Ichigo even says like, oh, do you work with Aizen? You worked with Aizen? Are you're like his little henchman trying to mess with us again? And he's like, no, I know, and that's not me, you know. But Ichigo, honestly, I do respect you for defeating Aizen. He was very strong, so, you know, I do respect you, but I'm gonna go and try and kill you now. Ichigo gets a nasty wound in this fight, but he gets saved by the Gotei 13, the real ones, who show up and then chase Kagerosa away, who flees to the Soul Society with the Reigai. So Ichigo's power is diminishing and hiccuping. This mysterious lady named Nozomi is in the world of the living. There's time issues with the Garganta. People are being replaced with Reigai. Not everybody knows this. Oh my goodness. Oh no. Oh my goodness, no. And entering the Soul Society is very dangerous because Kagerosa can control the precipice world. He worked in Squad 12 and that was his specialty, which allowed him to do all these things. Like when Zaraki and Mayuri went into the precipice world, he replaced them with Reigai, and then they framed Ichigo saying that, oh, Ichigo, the substitute Soul Reaper attacked us while we were in there. Yamamoto, you gotta imprison him. Kagerosa wants Ichigo because Ichigo's a weird, again, it's his strange mixture of powers, Hollow and Soul Reaper powers, that made it impossible for him to make a Reigai version of him. So he kind of has like a copy of all relevant characters, but they are stronger, more powerful, more aggressive, and on his side and do his bidding. But he doesn't have one of Ichigo, because Ichigo's weird and special, which is why he was after Ichigo. So some of the real Gotei 13 are now with Ichigo in the world of living and trying to protect Nozomi because clearly she has something that Kagerosa wants. Entering the Soul Society is dangerous. Nozomi doesn't believe anyone would care for her and rejects people's effort to protect and comfort her, so she runs away. Kon gets tricked by a Reigai Rangiku to let her have alone time with Nozomi. She tries to steal Nozomi and take her to the Soul Society, but they get reinforcements and Reigai Rangiku Rangiku retreats, which I feel like brings us to the second part of Act 1, where the Reigai captains in the Soul Society that we know give false testimony that Ichigo attacked them in the Precipice World. Ukitake and Shunsui and maybe Unohana are skeptical. You get sort of a Dangai training reference saying like, Mayuri's like,
Ichigo Kurosaki was doing strange things in the Dangai in the battle against Aizen where none of us could see him. Is it a big surprise that he's using it? He's drifting it away from the Soul Society and attacking us in the Dangai?
Yamamoto wants Ichigo to be captured, and then the Reigai lieutenants are sent to the world of the living to capture Ichigo. But for real, they're there to capture Nozomi because they're not doing Yama's bidding, they're doing Kagarosa's bidding. We get some pretty good fights in the world of the living, simultaneously in the forested hills of Karakura. Some good humor too, especially with Marechio Maida.
Look at him with his silly hair and his stupid outfit. Ugly collar he's wearing around his neck. Huh? What is it? That collar he's wearing. I've seen it before. I guess you have, Chubbs. Say what? Your worst fear. You're looking at yourself, Marechio Omaida!
The Reigai gist is mostly up at this point, because now that the originals are fighting the Reigai copies, to differentiate them, the show is starting to put like these bluish sparks in the Reigai's eyes to help the viewer sort of see the difference. So it kind of blows the cover here a bit, but we did get a lot of nice build-up and atmosphere with these replacing things. Here's buff Omaida, by the way. The Reigai are stronger than the original. We get some mirror matches, some not mirror matches. Some Reigai are defeated, others escape. The originals face some injuries, some lose fights, and there's some fake outs and switch ups with the Reigai still here, so it's kind of still alive. Reigai being indistinguishable idea. Rukia gets tricked by Reigai Nemu. The senior captains head off to plead with Central 46, saying, hey, there's something wrong. Ichigo's being framed for this stuff, so they go and do that. Nozomi walks off to the rift she entered the world of the living through. She wants to go back to the Soul Society. She doesn't like all this attention she's getting and everybody fighting on her behalf. Reigai lieutenants ambush her there, and there's more fighting. They realize that the Reigai are using Mod Soul technology, or at least, Cone does. So they find out that they need to destroy the Soul Candy too. Ichigo defeats a bunch of Reigai lieutenants by himself, protecting Nozomi, which starts to make her believe. She's beginning to believe that people do care for her, because Nozomi is touched by Ichigo's willingness to sacrifice his powers to protect her. Yes, but she still remains mostly withdrawn and sassy, and also calls Cone a pervert 13,000 times. You're onto something there, Nozomi. Act 2, I would say, is episode 324 to 334. Part 1 kind of coming to an end at 329. The captains in the world of the living decide to make a risky move and go into the Soul Society via the Dangai to help the senior captains fight off the Reigai and try to defeat Kagarosa. As staying in the world of the living only means more assaults and skirmishes, they can be attacked at any time basically, so even though they do have to go through the Dangai which Kagerosa controls, they kind of have to just make a move right now and try and end it sooner rather than later. Nozomi continues not to reveal any knowledge of what's going on or any powers that Kagerosa might want, so we still don't know why Kagerosa wants Nozomi. Captains Komamura, Hitsugaya, Kuchiki, and Zaraki attempt to enter the Soul Society. Kagerosa tries to swallow them up in the restricted flow, and Sajin makes an opening for them while the others escape, but is taken out by the Dangai. Again, he doesn't get to be a part of the plot. Just like in the Zanpakto Rebellion arc, he gets taken out and doesn't get to do as much. He does come back later in this arc at least. Not something I can say for the other. Reigai, Ukitake, and Shunsui try to assassinate Yamamoto. There's a long fight rages between them both, and they get worn down, and Yama only has one arm after battling with Aizen, so it's sort of like a rematch of the fight at the kind of endish of the Soul Society arc between Shunsui, Ukitake, and Yamamoto, but we get to see it, and it's a bit more balanced because Yamamoto only has one hand and the other two are stronger, and they have Unohana healing them. That's pretty cool. It's very interspersed, but it is a cool fight, and we get to see a lot of Yamamoto's Shikai, which is epic! We get a Kenny versus Kenny fight, which is excellent. We get Soifone versus Kenny, which is also really good. We get Hitsugaya versus Reigai Momo, which is one of the worst fights in the whole show, by the way. Just want to mention that. Yoroichi is there also to help out. We get Byakuya versus Reigai Hitsugaya, which is good, as well as Byakuya versus Reigai Byakuya, which is okay. Sajin reappears from the Dangai, so he does come back and get to do something, and he has an excellent fight with Soifone. This is excellent, yes! This part of the story, although having many great fights, is long, and you do start to get some battle fatigue from just the constant action. Even though it's all good, besides, you know, the Reigai Momo stuff, you do get a bit tired at this point, and it was around here on my first watch of Bleach where I got tired of this arc, but I was also kind of binging Bleach. I definitely was way more engaged when I rewatched this, but I will say that this bit does start to drag out a little bit, especially as it's not like Captains versus Zanpakto Spirits, it's Captains versus clones of Captains. Yeah. Ichigo tries to enter the Soul Society also, but Kagarosa manipulates the Dangai and suspends him there, a little bit at least, as he couldn't make a Reigai of Ichigo, so he's trying to tie up a loose end. Each captain gets worn down, they get like 2 fights each basically, but they eventually meet up after sustaining many injuries. After they have rallied together, they have an incredible fight with Kagarosa. Mayuri has a really nice moment too. I kind of think it's the second best fight in the arc. There's a massive twist. Damn! All of the Reigai that we defeated so far have just been easily remade. Just new Odd Souls and new Gigais by Kagarosa. All of that was for nothing. That's kind of annoying. That is genuinely annoying, but we do get to learn a bit about Kagarosa's powers. He can copy and paste instances in times. He can copy and paste attacks. Like, not just, like, the power, but also, like, Zaraki's arm that's swinging his blade, or if somebody kicks at him, he can copy and then paste that, and just, like, paste the kick. It's crazy. But the captains figure out that they need to stop Kagarosa from rotating his Shikai, and the rotation, you know, one way clockwise or anti-clockwise, I can't remember, but one way copies it and the other way pastes it, so they just have to stop him from rotating or spinning his Shikai. Kagarosa explains his goals. He was a scientist who led Project Spearhead, which is the project that was mentioned in the first arc, which created Cone in like episode 6. The one that was shut down and everything was destroyed, and the only thing that survived was information that he hid in the Precipice world, and Cone avoided destruction also. So that actually means Cone has a real place in this story. He's relevant, he's important, and he cares about the themes, and he cares about Nozomi and the Reigais because they are mod soul technology. Nozomi remembers she's also a mod soul, and so they start to get a genuine kinship there. The relationship they had goes from being extremely obnoxious and annoying both ways to actually being a little bit interesting. Kagarosa removes the bangles on the Reigai, which makes them stronger. Why did you have that? They were already strong, and now they're even more stronger than the originals? That doesn't make any sense. Ultimately, Kagarosa and his army, they win. They prevail over the captains. Dang! Now we have to go to part 2 of Act 2. Kagarosa goes to a cell where he speaks to his original body, who is in a coma. He's in a very bad condition after fighting all of the captains, you know, it wasn't... He did win, but he is kind of in a weakened state right now. In the world of the living, things are chill. Nozomi runs off again and is attacked by a hollow, which she doesn't mind. She just feels guilty about everyone risking their lives to protect her, so she just is fine with dying. But then Cone tries to save her, and now she has that connection with people, and she has a desire to protect, and she and Cone have this siblinghood because they're both mod souls, and so she awakens her Soul Reaper powers? Her Shikai allows her to absorb the attack of an enemy. What? Her Shikai allows her to absorb the attack of an enemy and add her own power to it and then fire back. Similar to Cero Doble that Neliel to Frank uses, but it's more universal. Kind of a mix of Hanato Yamada's Zanpakto power and the Cero Doble. Now that Nozomi has awakened her Zanpakto powers, the real Gote 13 decide, hey, this is a really strong Shikai ability. This is probably why Kagarosa wants her. So we need to train her to initiate her powers more so that we can use her. Fight against... Does that make sense? Kind of. It kind of makes sense. Anyway, so they start battling Nozomi to try and initiate her powers. Like, you know, I think Aizen says something like, the soul evolves or your powers evolve the more external threat, like existential threat it has on it. So they try and go hard on Nozomi and like fire really big attacks that she just has to absorb, otherwise she's going to get severely injured. And that helps initiate her powers, and she's getting a hold of them. While that happens, more and more Reigai are just showing up to the world of the living. First, it's Kenpachi, Reigai, and Ikaku uses his Bankai to fight him. I don't know about that. But more show up. Eventually, Ichigo, Nozomi, and Yamamoto fight Kagarosa, and it's a pretty great fight. Powers of Kagarosa and Nozomi clash. Kagarosa fires something at Nozomi, and Nozomi absorbs it, fires it back, and then it explodes everywhere, and it's gonna hurt everyone, and Yamamoto protects Nozomi, even though he looks down on her for being a monster. Yamamoto protects Nozomi and absorbs some of the blast. Yamamoto and Kagarosa are both injured. Everybody's tired. Kagarosa explains that he understands Nozomi more than anyone because they were both born from the same person, Okto, or Oko. He is the original researcher who created Mod Souls. When Project Spearhead happened and he was shunned, punished, he split his soul and turned them into 2 Mod Souls and put them in Gigai. Nozomi, who got lost in the Dangai and eventually escaped and landed in the world of the living naked, and then also Kagarosa, who continued to work in the research and development department under Mayuri Kurotsuchi. So he's basically been waiting things out for Nozomi to appear, and then he can invade and take over the Gote with his Reigai army, collect Nozomi, and then fuse back into the 2 souls back into Oko, who can then exact his revenge on the Soul Society for treating him so poorly, because he was just an independent researcher who was really pushing the boundaries of stuff. That's why Nozomi has been fleeing and not wanting to be captured, because she will lose her autonomy and be fused with Kagarosa. She thinks this is going to be an inevitable thing, it's going to happen, which is why she's been so calloused and pushed people away the entire arc and have been very unfriendly, because she didn't want to make connections and then like lose, because she kind of didn't really believe herself to be an actual person. She's half of a person who inevitably will be fused with Kagarosa, lose her own autonomy, and be part of Oko again. Now that they all know the truth, they still stand by Nozomi, and Ichigo, Renji, Rukia, Yamamoto, and Kon try and fail to defeat Kagarosa. There is an awesome sequence where Kagarosa is chasing and tracking down Nozomi through the woods and the hills, while Kon and Ichigo is trying to stop him, but they're weak, they're tired. Ichigo's losing his power, and eventually in a small forest, Ichigo fires one last hit at Kagarosa, and it fails. He loses his powers. Nozomi is captured, and Kagarosa returns to the Soul Society, which ends Act 2. Act 3 goes on from episode 335 to 341. Ichigo ventures into the Dangai, as earlier, when Kagarosa trapped him in there, some of the essence of his Soul Reaper powers have been preserved when he was suspended in the Dangai. Because of this meddling with time and space Kagarosa did to make his plan work, it allows Ichigo to recover his powers in a very visually stunning scene. Ichigo enters the Soul Society, and Urahara meets up with Yoruichi and some of the other captains. Urahara brings Kon to see the real developer of Mod Souls, which is the body of Oko, and I think it's in the Maggot's Nest. And they do that to try and track down Kagarosa. Everyone starts fighting each other again, but there's less like screen time of that, it's mostly off screen. Ichigo's powers, although he recovered some from being suspended in the Dangai, they are unbalanced, and they're going to be a temporary thing. He's left in a storage building in the Seirete because he can't control them right now. His hollow powers end up taking control of him. He's in that Ajuke's form for some reason, maybe because he only has a little bit of his powers left, so he's not in the Vasto Lorde form. Unfortunately, no good fights come out of this. Urahara does fight his double though. We get some Urahara on Urahara action. Kon goes ahead to save Nozomi, but she is already fused with Kagarosa before Urahara or Kon can stop it. Oko subdues Hollow Ichigo's rampage. The captains continue to fight their Reigai counterparts. It is kind of getting repetitive at this point. This is the 4th big showdown between the Gote and the clones of the Gote. Ichigo is saved by his friends before Oko kills him in his hollow form. This next bit, this climax, is basically what this arc is known for. In the Bleach community, people are like, the Zanpakto Rebellion arc is the best arc, but when oh man, you shouldn't skip the filler arc. Look at this Bleach filler arc, and then they show this next fight here.
Finally, I've waited for this.
Oh, hell no!
Ichigo and all of his friends versus Oko, and it is one of the best. Oh, it was so good. Anyway, and this is what this arc is famous for the ending. And so sort of a sentiment I hear is, this arc isn't that good, but that last fight though, Oh, that ending though, that Getsuga Tensho though, that animation though at the end, that's great. But overall, it's not a good arc, but the ending is great.
Like, the only redeeming qualities about this arc is the 3 good fights in the last episode, which is just amazing for some reason.
The final battle between him and Ichigo, a bit of an overused term. Between the score, the choreography, this was indeed pure cinema.
That's what I hear, and I have to agree and disagree at the same time. Sure, you can figure out which way I do those things. Anyway, Ichigo's friends fight Oko without him because his powers still haven't balanced yet, and they're defeated. Kon, hidden in Reigai Nemu's Gigai, brings a soul candy that Urahara has synthesized in Kagarosa's now abandoned laboratory, as he's now fused with Nozomi, and this soul candy will restore the balance in Ichigo's powers, but only briefly. I know we kind of lost Ichigo's powers and then he gains them again really quickly, but it did take like a few steps and some caveats, and it's only going to be a temporary thing just for this fight. So it's cool, it's good. Ichigo and his friends have a final climactic battle with Oko, and this is the one people talk about, and it's in the top 5 fights in the whole series, in the whole original Bleach anime, including the canon, including all the filler arcs and episodes, including the OVAs and the movies. It is far better than any fight in the Zanpakto Rebellion arc. It has one of the coolest and messiest Getsuga Tenshos ever, and it ends in a beautiful and emotional way.
Damn bastard! You have friends to be there for, to shield, to support people you care for!
Only the truly weak seek out the aid and comfort of others.
So why then? Why are you so strong?
The fight pivots on the point of what validates existence, on the backdrop of the controversy of created life caused by Project Spearhead's shutdown. Let me get a drink. Oko believes that others have dragged him down, unvalidated his life's work, and he alone has overthrown the collaborative military rank of the Soul Society, using his own technology to resurrect himself, allowing him to use his Zanpakto to a far greater extent than when he worked within the system. Yet Ichigo, with the help of his friends, and the connection forged with Nozomi continues to prevail as Oko more and more desperately starts grasping at straw to win the fight and to prove his superiority, which was forged by independence and isolation. Yet no matter how ridiculously strong Oko is, this is a complaint people have, that it doesn't make any sense how strong he is, and it is hard to follow why he's that strong, but it is because he uses his own technology. He has modified himself. His Shikai, his Kido, was not that strong when he was a regular Soul Reaper. It is only that ludicrously strong because he has a much more enhanced soul. Like Aizen was trying to cross over the boundary of a Soul Reaper by crossing over into the realm of hollows and stuff like that, like breaking the boundaries, while Oko is modifying his Soul Reaper soul to have more capacity, or to at least fill out the capacity without training. Anyway, yet no matter how ridiculously strong Oko is, he has profited off of other people's work. In copying people and into Reigai, he's profited off of other people's work, and so he's not fully dependent. He's not an island unto himself. He manipulated himself into loneliness, and Nozomi fights from inside because it's not like fully fused yet. It's 2 mod souls fused together to try and create his original form. Even his creations, the Reigai, turn against him to stop a fellow Reigai who's gone out of control, supposedly, which is, it's a little bit of it's just a way to kind of clean things up and solidify this theme of Oko is a lonely dude. Even like his clones that he forces to do his bidding have turned against him. And he is soundly defeated by an Ichigo who can't even sustain Bankai any longer. Kon says goodbye to Nozomi as herself and Kagarosa have split again, and they fade away. This arc is not followed by another related filler arc, but by a single episode showing Ichigo alongside Rukia struggling to fight hollows as his powers fade, eventually passing out and seamlessly transitioning into the canon manga material, where he wakes up, accepts his loss, and watches Rukia fade away, leaving him alone for 17 months. Boy, howdy! The recap of both of these arcs lasted almost an hour by themselves, so let's get right into the categories. Let's compare the arcs. How do I think? Because right now I think that they both have issues, both have excellencies, and I'm still unsure of which one's best. And now we're all caught up, we all got the major plot points down, we all have a little bit of an idea of my opinions about stuff, but let's get into the nitty-gritty. First thing, placement. What is place? The Zanpakto Rebellion arc, akin to the Kasumi conspiracy arc, its placement is disruptive, occurring in the middle of the first part of the Fate Karakura Town arc. Ione has just been incinerated by Yamamoto, Ichigo has just engaged Ukiura in Las Noches' throne room corridor. Now there are 3 filler episodes that interrupt this part in the main story first, but those 3 are immediately followed by this 26 episode long arc. That's right. Along with 3 miscellaneous filler episodes, this arc interrupts Ichigo vs. Ukiura's final fight, one of the highest rated and highest anticipated fights in all of Bleach. Not only that, but then this filler arc is followed up immediately by an extension, a DLC. It's got a 10 episode sub DLC arc called Sword Beast Filler Arc. Not the best name either. This arc makes up the majority of the 39 episode detour from one of the best fights to ever happen in Wako Mundo history. Not the best place. And not long after the Kasumi arc interrupted the end of the Ichigo vs. Grimmjow fight. Like, really think about it. In the manga, Ichigo vs. Grimmjow is interrupted, and then Ichigo vs. Ukiura is interrupted also by 20 plus long filler arcs. The best thing about this arc's placement is that the first episode of the Zanpakto Rebellion arc, episode 230, is Bleach's first widescreen episode, so when you skip it, you jump to widescreen, which is pleasant. There's no part of the main story. This filler arc doesn't fit, there's not like a place it logically could fit into the manga story. The Bount arc did that, it could do that. There was this little gap between the end of the Soul Society and the Arancars actually arriving. But here, there's just no way where, there's no place where this could make sense. Not a great placement overall. The Reigai Arc. This arc takes a page from the Bount arc. It seamlessly fits in after Aizen's machinations, where this time they fail and he is defeated. The main issue with this arc's placement is that Ichigo has lost his powers, remember? So, what's the deal? How come Ichigo is using Bankai in the arc's first episode? Well, they delayed Ruki's goodbye to be after this arc, and changed one detail. Instead of Ichigo's power disappearing soon after waking up from when he blacked out shortly after defeating Aizen, losing his powers will be a lengthier process, although it is just as painful. The more he exerts himself, the sooner his powers will be lost. And it's unknown how long this process would take, but they could go at any moment. And before then, they may hiccup and fail him along the way. This is pretty clever. We get to spend more time with Ichigo's powers recoiling from the aftermath of his sacrifice. The only thing that is confusing about this is, what does Zangetsu think? Can he commune with him at this time period? I don't know. This arc has no other filler like sandwiching it, and cleanly fits in between canon episodes. In fact, it even comes off as being fairly connected to the canon arcs. It has follow-ups and references to the past events that other filler arcs tend to feel less comfortable doing. Aizen's defeat is mentioned plenty, and a few threads from the very first arc are presented here also. Excellent placement and integration into the canon story, in my opinion. I'm not awarding points for each category, but this is one category where the Reigai arc does so much better than the Zanpakto Rebellion arc. Let's get to the next one. Concept. The Zanpakto Rebellion arc is just better and more unique to Bleach. An opportunity to explore the Soul Reaper's powers and Zanpakto's spirits. We get to see their designs and stuff. Getting pseudo fan service matchups, but with added layers of interest and a look into more core aspects of our characters. Want to see Hitsugaya vs Byakuya? How do we do that? What justification do we give? Well, how about a samurai with Byakuya's Zanpakto powers and a layer of his personality versus Hitsugaya instead? Is that more interesting? The limitation on this concept is that it highlights our beloved Gotei 13 characters. Which means we don't get to see as much of our other beloved characters, but we love the Gotei 13. Anyone who doesn't have a Zanpakto, like the humans and hollows, they are less focused on. The Reigai Arc. Seemingly a retread of Gotei versus Gotei that we had in the Zanpakto Rebellion arc, but more overt and less interesting. Now you've had Captain versus Captain Zanpakto style. Now, how about we do give you those Captain versus Captain fights after all, you know, like actually Byakuya versus Hitsugaya, but not actually them, but powered up aggressive clones? How does that sound? Especially as we've already had the Zanpakto Rebellion arc before. How does this one sound? Do you see how this is an inherently less interesting concept? Especially as the Zanpakto Rebellion arc was the last major filler arc we had, like 88 episodes earlier. Thank goodness some flavor was added to do with the Reigai replacing the old captains inconspicuously in Act 1, and tied the Reigais with Mod Soul technology. Otherwise, it would just be a complete lazy rehash, but they do add some things to make it interesting at least. I do think that the Reigai arc, the concept of it, would be viewed in a much nicer light if it came before the Zanpakto Rebellion arc, but that's not the way around they came out. Zanpakto Rebellion arc came out first and was more interesting, and then the Reigai arc kind of copied it. Not a great look for the concept. Just a little category here, the execution on the concept. The Zanpakto Rebellion arc has such a better, concept, and it has way more fruitful grounds to explore the Soul Reaper powers and the Zanpakto and the relationship and how Zenbon Sakura is way more similar in personality type to young Byakuya than now Byakuya, because Byakuya kind of hides his feelings more. So interesting, but I feel like this arc fails to meet up to its potential. It had such a superior concept, and so it just fails so much harder. And I feel like the Reigai arc actually is way more better at the execution of its concept. But it really comes down to, which one do you prefer? A ambitious story done okay, or a generic story done pretty well? Yeah, I feel like most people would probably go with the Zanpakto Rebellion one, so fair enough. But for me, I see the value of the Reigai arc executing really well on its concept. So let's move on to story, which was one of the hardest ones for me to get my head around. Story. For the Zanpakto Rebellion arc, Byakuya's portrayal is pretty annoying to watch, and his initial disappearance scene is flashed up a bit too often, but it does pay off with the Koga fight. I feel like it could have been more interesting though, but if there wasn't this mystery element in the plot, it would have been quite bare, especially as the Zanpakto Rebellion is solved and brushed off as a mind control very early on, and then just becomes Muramasa and Byakuya versus the Soul Reapers, so it's good to have that mystery there. Plenty of good story opportunities in the Zanpakto and Soul Reaper fights, and that's really the backbone. So story-wise, it's pretty okay, and the inclusion of the Kuchiki clan, old versus new generation, in both Ginrei versus Koga, and Koga versus Byakuya, is what elevates the story ultimately, I believe. The Reigai story, it does tie in the Mod Soul technology, which always seemed like an unexplored and potentially overpowered technological aspect in Bleach, and it gives Kon a purpose in the story and fills out his character more. Actually, when Kon was introduced, he was characterized as a strong value in life, even artificial life, because he is a survivor of a systematic killing. And then we kind of lose that in the canon material to just Kon is perverted gags, or him being overly attached to Rukia. Without this filler arc, I don't really like Kon. He has some funny stuff, and his banter in the Karakuriza filler is fun, but the Reigai arc brings back Kon being a character with genuine and important values. He has morals. It also gives us a greater opportunity to explore Ichigo's loss of power, not as a sudden thing, as while he's blacked out, but as a slow process. This is genius because it firstly allows the arc to happen naturally without having to put in a filler with the Fullbring arc, because I doubt they would do a filler arc where Ichigo just has no powers the whole time. They couldn't even do that with Uryu in the Bount arc. So the fact that they managed to justify it here means that the Fullbring was just like a clean break of just canon material with only one holiday New Year's special filler episode. And I'm really grateful that this arc had this idea and placed it where it is, so that the Fullbringer arc could just run, be beautiful, and do good without much interruption. The other thing this power degradation allows is Ichigo to continue to sacrifice his powers, as the more he exerts himself, the quicker his powers waver and disband. When he uses Bankai or uses Getsuga Tensho, he feels the long-term drain that is having on him and his powers. It highlights his willingness to sacrifice his powers with Aizen by allowing him to sacrifice whatever he has left, whatever he has remaining to protect Nozomi, allowing her to have the freedom to choose to live, which Kon enforces and encourages that theme with Nozomi. Let's get more into this, because the story is the biggest aspect when it comes to my uncertainty of which of the arcs is better than the other. I have been such a fence sitter, and I wanted to see if these stories are pretty much similar in quality or one rises above the other, because I really am having a tough time figuring this out. I think the story of the Reigai Arc is super underrated, and when I asked online on social media which of these two arcs has the best story, and story alone, not counting anything else, the majority agree that the Zanpakto Rebellion arc has a much better story, which falls into the line and the sentiment of the greater community considering the Zanpakto Rebellion to be Bleach's best and most ambitious filler arc. And I think I have to agree at least with the ambitious part. Tackling the Zanpakto Soul Reaper dynamic and relationship is one of the most layered and important aspects of Bleach and its power system. One that is not easy to tackle, especially when it was less clear at the time how deep the soul of the Shimigami and their powers go. We don't know Tensei Sangetsu solemnly fighting Ichigo to keep him away from the secrets of the final Getsuga Tensho, displaying that Zanpaktos ultimately care about their wielders above all else, which is actually explored with Muramasa as it leads to his downfall. But plenty of other Shimigami, when confronted with their Zanpaktos rebelling, aka being what's that noise? Boils down to, how dare you, I am your master, I am willing to slay you. Characters like Rukia and Momo, who are heartbroken that their sword or part of their own soul has turned against them, while the majority of the characters are more like, this is unfortunate, you must be destroyed, unfortunately. Okay, here I go, die now. Which is the least interesting by far of those three reactions. Then there's ones where Soul Reapers are upset and angry to see their Zanpakto betray them. This is important, as we would get to see who appreciates their Zanpaktos, but a major theme of this arc is appreciate your Zanpakto. When Zaraki in the Soul Society arc goes against this teaching, the division of his power causes him to lose the fight with Ichigo. This is the most trusting and willingly surrendered Ichigo is to his powers we see him up until this point. How do I say that in a better way? Show that clip, show the clip.
Can you hear the cries of his sword? You hear it, but he cannot. And when two who do not trust each other fight together, the strength they each possess is diminished. Do you have complete and utter trust in me?
I'm putting all of my power in your hands, Zangetsu. Do with me what you will.
Do you know that the Bible says a house divided will never prosper, and a kingdom divided is doomed to fall? If your soul is divided between the part in your spiritual body, your Konpaku, and the part in your weapon, your Zanpakto, just like Zaraki, Koga loses because he rejects this unity and he fights with the other half of his soul. He breaks the blade and stabs his own Zanpakto manifestation. And so he's fighting essentially with half a soul, like Kenpachi Zaraki. And he loses to Byakuya, who has a deep and clear connection and synergy with his Zanpakto, with his numerous techniques in Bankai, which he has honed on his path to mastering Bankai. Struggling a lot. And Bankai being the most honest and powerful manifestation of their powers, of that part of his soul. This, as well as having his Bankai being the safe zone that protects him from being attacked, which in fact is the very first hint that Byakuya gets that his Zanpakto is turning against him is the safe zone is gone. Byakuya gets cut by a petal in the very first scene of the whole arc. His safe zone was malfunctioning, or perhaps it never was there, but just through habit, Byakuya was moving around like it was. Byakuya beats Koga. Ichigo beats Kenpachi Zaraki for the exact same reason. Because their opponents don't heed the teaching of the main theme of the Zanpakto Rebellion arc. Appreciate your powers, be united internally, and you will be stronger. And this is not just the big theme for this arc, but a major theme for Bleach and Bleach's power system as a whole. And this, I think, is why people believe that this arc has the best story, because it ties so overtly to the main story's themes, as does the Reigai arc, but just not so overtly. An important note, if a Zanpakto spirit is defeated by anyone else besides their own counterpart, they supposedly die forever. But Mayuri revives all the casualties by the end of the arc, like just before Act 3. Sadeno Shiayuki and Wabisuke Reigai are the only ones we see that actually like die on screen and they're revived. So that tension is only very temporary in the arc.
When you try your best but you don't succeed. Try.
My issue is those who didn't have as much issue fighting with the Zanpakto spirits, and they were just like, oh yeah, sure, fine, I'll fight with you. They weren't heartbroken. And even the ones that aren't fighting their own Zanpaktos and potentially killing them forever, they didn't seem to have much reservations about killing someone else's power or part of their co-worker's soul. You know, I just found it crazy. There was not the emotional heights that there should have been. And those characters who hate their Zanpakto, like Yumachika and Hisagi, as well as characters who are angry or offended by the Zanpakto spirits in this arc, like Soifon, Mayuri, and Ikaku, are just mean to their Zanpakto, and they don't really have any more appreciation of them at the end of this arc. Like, they don't learn to appreciate them more. And I know you can't really change big things because it's a filler arc, but if we got to see Yumachika appreciate his Zanpakto more, at least we could just have that in our heads and feel like this filler arc actually taught our characters something. Even if he doesn't love and he still holds the rule about not showing his Kido-based Zanpakto to his squad members, at least we could have a difference, because in the Arrancar rival arc, we see Yumachika just hating his Zanpakto, smashing it, grinding its edge against a rock. It would have been nice to see at least some characters have a bit more of transformation with their relationship. And I know that's like a big deal in Bleach, but it would have been nice to at least plant some seeds here. And it really only feels like Rukia ever has any of those sorts of moments in this arc. And that was like episode 3, and then it was done with. Pretty disappointing. And the wording too kind of poisons the well. A lot of characters talk about being, I'm your master, how dare you disobey your master. And I just feel like it kind of makes you feel bad for the Zanpakto, that these arrogant Soul Reapers who don't have any empathy for like their entire power, like their Shikai, their Bankai, and they just don't appreciate them. But this never gets addressed because they're only rebelling because of the mind control. They can't have genuine reasons or genuine like issues internally with themselves. They're just not allowed to do that. And the language being used, how dare you disobey your master. And this is in the point of the story where we think that the Zanpakto Rebellion, because of some genuine reason like mistreatment, abuse, or poor or ill-fitted masters, this is something they really could have capitalized on. And it would have been so powerful if the characters transformed their views on their relationship from a master and a servant, or a wielder and a tool, or an owner and a slave outlook, to one of more mutual respect and understanding. And this definitely is something that you can do in a filler. Like I said with the Yumachika example, he can still be embarrassed and hide it, but we can at least see him appreciating it a bit more. This is one of those things where it can be an invisible change as we view characters in arcs to come, and even in the future, if a character still hates their Zanpakto, like Hisagi still hates his Zanpakto.
I mean, it works and all, but I can't stand the look of the damn thing. Look at the shape of it. Like it was made for reaping lives.
It doesn't conflict with the idea that at one point he learned to appreciate it a little bit. Maybe he forgot about the lesson. So I do feel like it's not breaking the canon for characters to appreciate their Zanpakto and kind of have relationship renewal in this arc with their spirits. This arc does let us know that some Soul Reapers see their Zanpaktos as slaves or tools, like Koga, yet Koga is proven wrong and loses, and these other characters who kind of view Zanpakto in that way, but don't outwardly reject and portray them, they learn nothing and change their mind and change nothing. And what is a story if characters go through all these themes and lessons if they don't have any moments of change? That's my argument. That's just my argument there, that the whole Zanpakto spirit thing actually wasn't handled very well, and we did get some bits, but I feel like it was only like maybe 15% of the potential, which is why when I watch this arc, even though the concept is better, I just feel disappointed, and I just feel like, just feel a little bit annoyed, because I'm like, it could be so much better, and they're giving these mixed messages, and especially when I first watched this arc, this was a really big problem for me. It's kind of like the logic and the teaching of this arc completely misses applying this theme to anyone but Koga and Byakuya. That being said, the story is still ambitious, and I think a story that aims high and disappoints is more admirable than a generic one done well. There we go. That being said, I think as generic as the power of friendship and teamwork is in the Reigai arc, they both do it well and has has a bit more to offer with Ichigo's dynamic and the value of life, and how artificial life still needs the freedom to choose. So that it's not just the power of friendship. There is more going on there. And, mind control bad in both arcs. That's the theme in both arcs. Don't be like Aizen and hypnotize people. Also Koga literally has perfect hypnosis. What the hell? Why is he so OP when he doesn't have his Zanpakto? He literally has Aizen's Zanpakto powers. He's manifesting another soul within himself to act as the basis of his Soul Reaper powers instead of projecting them onto a sword. How does that operate in the framework of the themes? I don't know. It doesn't. It just doesn't. So anyway, hot take, the Reigai story is better than the Zanpakto Rebellion arc. Both our arcs explore a main theme in Bleach, one being appreciate your own powers and be in harmony and understanding in your innermost being, and the other one being following our purpose is what makes us strong. We find our purpose in protecting what is important to us, even if it means sacrificing ourselves for our friends. And in a way, it's the same thing. One is about loving you internally, and the other is about loving externally, loving your friends. But where the Zanpakto does this inconsistently, albeit with a stronger foundation, the Reigai arc actually does it successfully, and its biggest detractor is the fact that it came out preceding instead of preceding the other arc. It's easier for people to look at the Zanpakto Rebellion arc story more favorably because of the fan service, because of the good fan service, that being pretty much the Zanpakto designs, getting to actually see them, because it reveals more of the deeper character of the Soul Reapers. So there you go. I think I've decided the Reigai arc has a marginally better story, while the Zanpakto Rebellion arc might have a marginally better, or at least more consistently better, set of fights. Which is the complete opposite of what this guy says.
It's so boring. And it's only like 2 or 3 good fights. Like, I don't get how I'm supposed to care about Nozomi. She doesn't even really have a personality. Same with Kagorosa, he's just boring.
Okay, quickfire other topics. Structure. They're similar. The Reigai arc is a bit more repetitive and with more distinct waves of battles and conflict theatre, but the Zanpakto Rebellion arc sometimes feels like it lacks structure and has an extra bit at the end that probably didn't need to be there, especially the penultimate episode that was pretty much pointless. Could have just been maybe 2 or 3 minutes. Didn't need to be 20 minutes. Coming up next, the pacing. Zanpakto Rebellion, some battle fatigue in the middle, and one episode that could have been cut entirely, like I just said. Fairly consistent with good pacing. The only time when the pacing tanks is after Koga's defeat. The Reigai arc pacing, there is fatigue in the middle and at the end of Act 2, and some slower episodes. Otherwise, it's good. The fights, I mentioned this before, I do think the Zanpakto Rebellion arc has the edge, at least in average quality, as well as like quantity of good fights. Now, yes, the Reigai arc has one of the best fights in Bleach, and the other fights are pretty good, but I went through all the fights, I gave them rankings, and for the Zanpakto arc, I gave 11 fights an A grade, 11 of them. And I feel like the fights themselves overall have better writing and dialogue. Now, in the Reigai arc, there are less fights. I rated them slightly lower overall. There's less great fights, but they do have the best fight by far in either arcs. But it's just that one fight. 4 fights in the Reigai arc I gave an A, and one of them I gave an S, which I didn't give to anything in the Zanpakto fight. I feel like the fights in the Reigai arc, what they have over the Zanpakto Rebellion arc, is better animation. There's the downtime. The Zanpakto Rebellion downtime usually spent planning or worrying about how the independent Zanpakto spirits work, if they can recover their powers, or if they'll be destroyed. Lots of Ukitake and Shunsui taking control because Yamamoto's gone. In the Reigai arc, the downtime is way more varied, mostly in the world of the living, which we don't get to see as much in the Zanpakto Rebellion arc because it's very Seirete focused. There's lots of downtime with Nozomi, which isn't exactly quality time, but we do get to see the human gang throw a barbecue, Kon being a character, and some time with the Soul Reapers talking to each other and connecting in the world of the living. I feel like the downtime in the Reigai arc is higher quality and gives us breaks from the battle heavy sections. The Zanpakto Rebellion arc uses its downtime for concerns about the rebellion, and its lack of downtime leads to having much higher density of fights. On average, the Zanpakto Rebellion arc has 3 fights per episode, as opposed to the Reigai arc, which almost exactly has 2 fights per episode, which is still plenty. So you can see how the Zanpakto Rebellion arc is way more fight dense with less downtime. That being said, I still felt like they both gave me a bit of battle fatigue. Even though one had so much more battles than the other, I felt like the one with less battles kind of gave me more battle fatigue, so maybe that says something about the quality or the pacing of the battles themselves also, or at least how they're presented. The other section is character use. I'm not too sure about this, because I think I prefer how the Reigai Arc uses the pre-established characters, but you can't deny how awesome it is to get to interact and see the Zanpakto spirits fight too, and their characters too. Sodeno Shirayuki is deeply tied with Rukia, but they are different characters from each other. So the Zanpakto Rebellion arc, it gets to explore the Soul Reaper characters we already know and love. Gives Kenpachi some hype moments, even though he doesn't have a Zanpakto spirit. It does get rid of Koromora and Chojuro, like right off the bat, but it characterizes Chojuro more than any other arc, because we get to spend a lot of time with his Zanpakto spirit, but not the actual Soul Reaper. Yamamoto is also not used much, as he spends most of the arc with his eyes and ears closed in some cave. Plenty of characters get good moments like Rukia, Byakuya, Ikaku, Izuru, Old Man Zangetsu, etc. But the human characters, as well as some notable Soul Reapers, are largely left out, like Urahara, Yamamoto, Komamura, like Ichigo's gang, Orihime, Chad, Uryu. It's good to see Momo in action though, as well as seeing Ginrei Kuchiki, who gets some action in the flashback. As for new characters, we have all the Zanpakto spirits, Muramasa and Koga Kuchiki, and they are all great characters. All of the characters we get introduced to are good or great. The Reigai arc uses more recurring characters, but obviously we don't learn as much about the Soul Reaper's inner personality through the Zanpakto. No, we don't get all that stuff. We just get clones. We still get their purposes and goals highlighted when they're fighting their clones, because that's like one of the biggest difference besides like the power imbalance and the aggression. The clones, they kind of say that, oh, us Reigai, we have our own beliefs and goals, but they don't really make a big statement. They don't really say it. They kind of have a moment at the end of the arc, but it is kind of weak. Their goals ultimately are just like, we gotta stop Oko because he's gone out of control, even though they highlight it in the fight with Yamamoto pretty big, and then I can't even remember what they say about it. But when there are mirror matches like Byakuya versus Reigai Byakuya, the real ones get to highlight and enforce what they care about, because that's the difference, because the other ones, they kind of have their own thing going on, but mostly they just listen to Kagarosa, while the originals, they have their own things that they strive for, goals, people they want to protect. And so we do get a little bit of that, but not as much as in the Zanpakto Rebellion arc, obviously. Urahara has a bigger role to play here, and we actually get to see him fight. Yama has a few good fights, and we get to see him in action with only one arm, which is epic. Shunsui and Ukatake are used less in this arc, as in the Rebellion arc, we got scenes with their Zanpaktos, which were really cool, and they were leading the Gote in Yamamoto's absence, so they're not as prominent here. Ichigo's friends get more to do than just have one fight in the third act where they lose to the antagonist. They support Ichigo and Nozomi through the plot and help greatly, not greatly, in the final showdown with Oko, and they're very important with the power of friendship and interdependence, not independence. Uryu gets an early fight also against Kagarosa, and Chad and Orihime back Ichigo up when he arrives for his first fight against Kagarosa also. We get to see a few new characters, Nozomi, Kagarosa, Oko, which are interesting, but we don't get to see as much of Oko, and Nozomi spends a lot of the arc being a bit frustrating, but she is struggling. We do get to understand both her and Kagarosa a bit more across the duration of the arc. I think that the new characters and the character designs are superior in the Zanpakto Rebellion arc by far, but the Reigai arc includes more reoccurring characters in a greater way and leaves less by the wayside. Inclusions of Yamamoto and Urahara in particular are appreciated by me in the Reigai arc. And then for the intros, like the anime openings, I'm sorry, but the opening is just so much better for the Zanpakto arc, is what I would say. But I went back and watched both of the openings for these arcs, and I have to say I think I had a very personal opinion there, one that maybe I don't always sync up with, because the reason why I have usually considered the Reigai arc opening to be not as good or less preferable is because it is so quick. The pace is so quick, you can hardly keep track of it. It is just fighting, frenetic, explosive. It kind of feels like a mess, but when it gets to that second part, you kind of get into the groove, you catch up with the speed, and you're like, okay, this is kind of awesome. And it does represent the arc. There is lots and lots of fighting. But we don't have a lack of action in Bleach. I appreciate the vibe and the atmosphere and the music of the Zanpakto Rebellion's opening more. Sometimes the vocals are kind of irritating to me, especially when you first hit play, a little bit like that Arrancar Arrival arc opening with Kon. When you first hit play, it is a bit annoying. But when you get into the song and like, oh yeah, I actually like this. And I find that with the Reigai Arc, when I press play, it's annoying, but then I settle into it and get the atmosphere. Zanpakto Rebellion arc, it's just nice, it's a bit cooler. Even though I think the editing is superior on the other one, the Reigai arc, I think the editing and presentation, and the guitar is so good too. I think overall, most of the time, I would go with the Zanpakto Rebellion arc, but I do take back what I said, that it's obvious which one's better. I think some people might like one or the other more. Where the Zanpakto really excels is with the closings, because the Reigai closing is just credits. Black screen, credits, and then some screenshots that cycle through. It's incredibly lazy. Laziest closing by far. There's no flair to it. There's not a second one usually. For every opening there's 2 closings, but for this it's just credits. There isn't an extra one for this arc. But there are 2 for the Zanpakto Rebellion arc, and the first one is genuinely so good. It's my favorite closing. And the effort from my assumptions for most of the closings, that I imagine the openings probably take 4 or 5 times more effort than the closings do. Yet this closing, for the first closing for the Zanpakto Rebellion arc, I prefer it over some of the openings. It is so good. The colors, the song. Somebody give me a rest. Getting to see all the spirits paired with their owners, it's so good, it's perfect for the arc, and seeing the outlines of the Zanpakto spirits changing into the outlines of the actual Zanpakto swords is so cool. The second ending is not quite as good, but it's nice and calming. I do like the song, and I really like that shot with Byakuya and Ichigo on that stage. That bit's really cool. So that second closing is not the best, but that first one I think is genuinely better and rivals a lot of the openings. So overall, even though the openings for these 2 arcs, you can go back and forth on, the endings, it's night and day. It's the worst closings compared to the best closing. Zanpakto arc is better in this category by far. Here is a little fun one before we reach the conclusion, and that's how imperfectly did the good guys win, which is essentially in a show where none of the good guys die, even in the war arc, which is an issue I have with Bleach. It's a minor but very notable one. Gin does not count. I'll make a video on that another time. For a show where the canon story doesn't kill off named good guy characters, they very rarely lose a fight, and if they do, even if it looks lethal, it ain't. Kaido, Orihime. It does a lot of things to try to create stakes and tension, and it's fairly effective even on a rewatch, where the viewers know the good guys are safe. But how do the fillers handle this issue? Where on the first time watch, not just on the rewatch, but on the first time watch too, you know the filler can't kill someone off unless it's a filler character. The good guys, they either steamroll and win perfectly, or they need to have like non-deadly injuries, losses, setbacks, failures. But how much do the good guys imperfectly win? What do they lose? Like what hits do they take? And as we know,
Perfection is boring. It's a dead end for men of science like you and me.
I despise perfection. If something is truly perfect, that's it. Do you understand? To men of science like us, perfection is a dead end.
So even if we know our heroes will win, we don't want them to win perfectly, right? Mayuri would agree. So in the Zanpakto Rebellion arc, the good guys lose a decent amount, especially at the start, which gives the beginning and mid of the arc a lot of tension. they immediately lose their, their head captain's leadership as Yama is missing. They all lose their Zanpakto abilities, which is huge, even if temporary, but the threat of permanently losing their powers is at risk. If someone else defeats the Zanpakto, a spirit is permanently lost. Oh, of course it isn't. Mayuri figures out how to revive them. But Rukia and Izuru, they lose their Zanpakto spirits. They lose out on regaining their Zanpakto powers until the third act, while Ichigo and Renji recover them within like the first few episodes. The Gotei also lose Captain Komamura and Chojuro Sasakibe in the first episode, leaving them in the recovery ward for the majority of the arc. Again. Sorry. And that also risks their Zanpakto spirits, as they can't defeat them themselves. The Gotei lose Byakuya in the initial attack thinking he was killed, but then they find out he's alive, and they lose his allegiance as he fights for the bad guys for a bit until he fights one of the two main antagonists, Koga. Nameless Stealth Force members all die, as they do every time they come on screen. Squad 6's barracks suffers like a lot of damage from both good guys and bad guys battling. Kenpachi and Zabimaru do particular amounts of damage there to the infrastructure. Shuhei Hisagi has a notable loss against his Zanpakto Kazashini, who wounds him heavily. Izuru, who is without his Zanpakto powers due to Kenpachi killing Wabisuke, has to take over and has a couple of matches with Kazashini in Shuhei's place throughout the arc. There are plenty of fights that are lost, like Ruri Kujaku versus Yumichika, where the good guy is temporarily injured and they get ready for the next round of fighting. Ichigo, Isane, Momo, and some others are all poisoned by Konjiki Ashisogicho and are unable to fight for a short bit while Captain Unohana heals them. Also, after capturing Tobiyume and Heineko in the cage to transport them to Squad 12 for research, they are rescued and are returned to Muramasa's forces. Ichigo is also tricked into breaking Yamamoto's barrier and allowing the most powerful Zanpakto to be brainwashed, which traps all of the senior captains, only letting Ichigo go ahead to the world of the living to stop Muramasa. Ichigo's friends fail. Chad gets beaten up again. Koga is released. Things go bad for the bad guys from then on, and the good guys rally and have their powers back. Everyone is in good health and they win. It feels like the Gotei do actually lose and are underpowered in the first two waves of the rebellions. They have setbacks and the enemy can't be tracked. They can attack at any time and keep rallying and taking few losses in the early game. This all adds tension and makes Muramasa intimidating, although the finale goes all to plan for the Soul Reapers and they steamroll. The Reigai Arc, similarly, there's lots of tension at the beginning, but instead of a bombastic entrance by the bad guys, there's a slow and hidden takeover as the Gotei 13 members are replaced by Reigai. The main antagonist doesn't reveal themselves at first, and the Soul Society turns against Ichigo as he is framed by the Reigai who give false testaments. This leads to both tension, mystery, and a feeling of isolation. The antagonist didn't steal the good guy's power, but he replicated them, and is dividing from the shadows. Divide and conquer. He's dividing from the shadows, ready to conquer. The Soul Society is losing its clarity, and the chain of command is disrupted. Ichigo loses his allies, and has to hide it when he's in the Seirete and act from the shadows, with only Rukia and Yoruichi's help. Ichigo definitely loses the first fight against Kagorosa, and gets some nasty injury, having to be rescued by the Gotei 13. Not only did he lose the fight, but he also used his Bankai and Hollow Mask, and still lost, meaning he strained and lost some of his power, as both Bankai and the Hollow Mask make the candle burn brighter, bringing him closer to a total loss of his Soul Reaper powers. The captains and lieutenants have been pushed out of the Soul Society into the world of the living. They then almost lose Nozomi when Reigai Rangiku almost captures her. The lieutenants lose some of their fights against the Reigai in the world of the living. Rukia is injured when tricked by the Reigai by the train tracks. Captain Komamura is temporarily lost in the Dangai when the captains enter the Soul Society. Ichigo is trapped there by Kagorosa for a short time also. Kagorosa undoes all of the good guys' efforts and revives all the Reigai and powers them up even. The captains all sustain notable injuries. Head Captain Yamamoto is worn down in a long 3v1 against Jushiro, Shunsui, and Unohana, and has to retreat to the world of the living also. Ikako loses to Reigai Zaraki. Yamamoto absorbs a huge attack to protect Nozomi and is injured. Pretty much everyone else is disabled for a short while. Nozomi gets captured and Ichigo fails to protect her and loses his powers. Ichigo recovers some of his powers after retrieving his spiritual energy from the Dangai, but it's so unstable that he's unable to control himself and hollow-fires. Urahara and Kon fail to stop Nozomi from being fused to Kagarosa. Then Ichigo is saved by his friends, recovers enough of his powers, long enough to defeat Oko, the big bad guy, and the Reigai self-destruct, all sacrificing themselves, and Kon and Ichigo get to speak briefly with Nozomi before she dies. Both the early and late stages of this arc go poorly for the Gotei, only turning around at the end. They do lose less, but the bad guys they defeat get revived, so the big losses are more like plot points that don't feel as genuine as losing more individual or group fights. It's sort of like a plot loss because they get revived instead of just winning the fights, you know? But it does show how insanely powerful the main antagonist is and his technology. The antagonist achieves their goal of reviving Oko, but fails to keep control of the situation. If anything, I feel like this shows that the tension and stakes is something the Zanpakto Rebellion arc does do slightly better, but it also plays its cards earlier. The Zanpakto Rebellion arc is less excited to give the good guys any wins, but they also aren't too affected by their losses, which is odd, as despite the stakes, they are surprisingly unemotional. If the stakes aren't that high after all, and the Reigai arc allows mixed outcomes to fights, it also legitimizes many wins the good guys have. In both arcs, the Soul Society suffers lots of damage, as they always do. There is a pretty good balance of losses and setback that the protagonists deal with that keep the tension throughout each of these arcs. Again, Zanpakuto feels like it does it a bit better, but plays its cards earlier. Okay, now we've talked about everything. We're gonna condense it all, and we're gonna do a direct comparison, my issues. Then I'm gonna go through a short list of great things, some uncertain aspects I have. So negatives, positives, and then neutrals. We'll do that for both of them and then compare. So to kick off our comparison, we're gonna start with the Zanpakto Rebellion arc, and here are the condensed issues. Issue number 1, inconsistency with how the Zanpakuto powers work. When Renji gains his Zanpakuto back, there are now 3 Zabimarus, maybe. And the snake and monkey who make up the Zanpakuto spirit, there's the Zanpakuto Zabimaru in their hands, and then there's another Zabimaru in Renji's hands. It just seems odd.
I'm confused! When you talk about Zangetsu, do you mean the one you're holding? Or is it this one? In mine?
Is Zabimaru fighting with their own power while still letting Renji borrow it? Wouldn't Renji need his Zanpakuto spirit to use Shikai and Bankai? The Zanpakuto spirits also seem as strong by themselves as they are with their Soul Reaper powers amplifying them. Like when Snake and Monkey are fighting and using Bankai, their Bankai is just as strong as if Renji was using Bankai. So Renji has the other part of the soul. So if Zabimaru is born from Renji's soul or is part of Renji's soul, then how come when it operates without the rest of his soul, it's just as strong as when it operates with his soul? They're supposed to amplify each other. Isn't that right? Like Ichigo and Zangetsu? The whole theme of the Zanpakuto spirit working in conjunction with the Soul Reaper and amplifying each other's powers by having harmony in their souls is countered by the main antagonist, Koga, who is narratively the rival to this ideology because he breaks Muramasa and fights by himself. But he doesn't need his Zanpakuto when he fights. He's strong enough alone. And he still has some of his Zanpakuto powers. He can do illusions, like Kyoka Suigetsu, but without a Zanpakuto. So how come he is so powerful without his Zanpakuto? How does this make any how does this interact with the themes? Byakuya used his Zanpakuto to beat him, but it was a really, really tough fight. Wouldn't it be better if Renji manifested his Zanpakuto spirit and fought alongside it, so it can use Bankai and Shikai and stuff, and he can still use his Soul Reaper powers and be really strong? Wouldn't that just be better? The only downside to that, which is if somebody kills Zabimaru, he won't be able to recover it. I guess if his Shikai breaks, he can recover it. But what would kill Zabimaru would kill him, so he would lose Zabimaru, but he would also not be dead and still have his Soul Reaper powers. So this is confusing. This doesn't make much sense. If the Soul Reaper is killed, their Zanpakuto turns into a sword beast. Does this matter that much? And they will be autonomous, and they can still fight without their soul counterpart, like Muramasa. The only issue is down the line, they will go crazy and attack anyone, but Muramasa sustains himself for like decades, maybe like a century or so. So this is all pretty confusing how this all works and what are the downsides, and it just opens up a whole can of worms. And even if we made sense of this all, sorted it out and get clarifying information, it's still confusing with the information that we have right now, and most people are either not going to think about it that much, or they'll be confused on the core mechanics that the arc is supposedly exploring. It's not as interesting as it could be, it doesn't answer as many questions as it should have, it ends up just making things confusing, and now I have so many more questions about how Zanpakto spirits work. Which would be okay if they weren't counterintuitive to the themes of the arc. How working together makes you stronger, because working separately seems to just be the more ideal way to go here. Second point is the misunderstanding of how the show has explained Ichigo's powers so far. Now, I know this is a debate, and when the show was coming out, people weren't all on the same page, but when Muramasa calls on Ichigo's Zanpakto spirit, Old Man Zangetsu comes out. Then Ichigo turns into a hollow and fights Old Man Zangetsu. White Zangetsu is completely ineffective. At this point in the story, we have found out White Ichigo is Zangetsu.
I am Zangetsu!
So either White is always Zangetsu and his hollow powers are directly connected to him, or he's only sometimes Zangetsu when he's the center of Ichigo's power and represents his hollowdom. When he said I am Zangetsu, that was only because he was letting his hollow side take control and be the center of his powers. When in any other circumstance, like when we first see Hollow Ichigo, he returns to Old Man Zangetsu and says, "Can I come back now?" Essentially being that he's the smaller part of Zangetsu, kind of like a yin and yang thing. What I think most people can assume is that White Zangetsu might actually be the main Zangetsu, because he's the only one who claims to be Zangetsu. Old Man Zangetsu does not claim to be Zangetsu. He tries to tell Ichigo his name, and then we find out the name is Zangetsu, but it ends up being the other part of Ichigo's powers name. So why is it that Old Man Zangetsu comes out here? Out of the two things, we can say either White is always Zangetsu, or they both can be Zangetsu. But what happens here is Old Man Zangetsu seems to be the only one, while White Zangetsu has nothing to do with any of this and is completely unaffected. Either Old Man Zangetsu is temporarily the center of Ichigo's power, and so he gets pulled out, which means that White Zangetsu, by default, is the center of his power. Unless Old Man Zangetsu is still giving Ichigo power, Muramasa used his brain control thing again, would he then brain control White Zangetsu? Because he's the only Zangetsu who could be there? No! He tries to use it and it doesn't work on Zangetsu. Is it because White Zangetsu also holds Ichigo's hollow powers? It makes it way more complicated than what we thought before. We thought it was like a yin and yang thing, or White Zangetsu is the real Zangetsu, and Old Zangetsu, we have no idea if he even is Zangetsu or not. But this one says, no, Old Man Zangetsu is the only Zangetsu, and White Zangetsu is unaffected because he's not a Zanpakto spirit. Are we supposed to think that Old Man Zangetsu is Zangetsu, and White Zangetsu, who says he's Zangetsu, the only one who says that, just isn't? He's just not. How many times do I have to say Zangetsu? Anyway, some of Byakuyo's actions feel very calloused and hard to understand, even if he was trying to protect his clan's honor by freeing and then killing Koga. So he's trying to clean up that rocky part of the clan's history when the Kuchikis defiled the Soul Society and acted alone by defiling the Soul Society, destroying his sister's Zanpakto, betraying his squad and having them put under house arrest, and acting on his own accord. Why not just kill Muramasa? He's the only person who's ever going to try and break Koga out. Or ask the Soul Society where Koga is and have him executed. Yamamoto knows where they sealed Koga. Byakuyo knows about Koga too, as in the initial events of the arc, when Muramasa shows up in the Zanpakto Rebellion strike, he immediately on the offset decides to make his move to try and kill Koga and side himself with the Zanpakto spirits. Episode 254, the penultimate episode of this arc, was a nothing episode and dragged out the ending. The next point is, there's also odd attitudes towards Zanpaktos for some characters. They just don't appreciate the Zanpakto, or emotionally the stakes are oddly low. Like some Soul Reapers will fight their Zanpakto, thinking killing them is destroying their powers forever, and just not really care at all. Completely apathetic and indifferent. Also, the hollow stuff falls a little flat, feels a bit shoehorned in. Like, how does Muramasa find and absorb a Vasto Lorde? He should not be strong enough to do that. How did he just found one? Did he find multiple ones? It seems like he goes in, absorbs a bunch of Menos, and he's got a Vasto Lorde. How could he contain that? For me, it just feels like we need it to be edgy. We need this guy to be like Ukiura. Let's have him absorb a Vasto Lorde. And it didn't really pull off at the end. Like, it did feel shoehorned in. Was it a nice inclusion? Some parts of it I appreciate with the ending, but really, we could have had without it. We really could have. It wouldn't change much at all. The only thing it does is, oh, he's been sustaining himself and not turned into a sword beast least because he's absorbing hollows, but what's with the Vasta Lorde thing? Another issue I have is there's too much immature and obnoxious arguing, especially between Hinako and Tobiyume. Catfights, essentially. It's fine, but I just think it happened too much. There were quite a lot of scenes where it was just that. They also get captured after a good fight where they fight their masters, and working together and synergizing between two Soul Reapers trumps two arguing Zanpakto spirits, which actually enforces the theme, but they just get broken out afterwards and they come back on screen and are part of the story just constantly. Wabisuke, my favorite Zanpakto, gets killed off too early. That's a very personal issue. The next issue is the idea of the Zanpaktos being treated poorly or being unappreciated by their masters is explored at the beginning, at its height in the first 3 episodes with Rukia, and then it's completely undermined by many characters not caring or not resolving this issue, and when this issue is revealed to be completely manufactured by Muramasa's mind control, and that's my next one, Muramasa's mind control. The idea is the Zanpakto spirits have these little gripes or issues. Sometimes they have big issues, like with Kazashini, and sometimes it's just basing it off just the smallest tiny little grain and insecurity of the Zanpakto spirit's personality, and exploiting that and basically mind controlling them to do stuff. And when they ask, why are you doing this? They give the smallest response and say, oh, but it's really important to me. But there was still an issue. Some spirits still had issues with their masters. Would they rebel against them for that? No, but they still had that, and it would be lovely if the Soul Reapers reconciled with their spirits, like what Rukia does, but nobody else does it. And the other issue I have with Muramasa's mind control is it works slowly with its onset at the beginning of the arc. Zanpaktos are becoming unresponsive and distant over the course of a few days. But Yamamoto's Zanpakto, the oldest Zanpakto relationship in the Seirete and maybe the universe, is controlled in an instant of the barrier coming down. Was it proximity? Because Muramasa was right there? And Komamura, what about him? This is the next issue. He's got the deepest connection with his Zanpakto. His Bankai literally sharing his own movements and pain with him. Yet he's the first guy to have his Zanpakto attack him and get killed off. And also, what would happen if the Zanpakto actually crushed him? Wouldn't it get crushed too? Are they not still connected? Clearly not, I guess. Was Tenken about to kill himself when he tried to kill Sajin in Bankai form? I like to think that their connection is so close that even if they rebelled, they would still share each other's pain. I like Komamura, and he hardly gets to do anything in these filler arcs. He gets nothing to do in the Bound arc. The Bokoto arc, even when Yama was being attacked, he hardly does anything in the movies either. He has a really awesome Zanpakto with a deep connection that he could have a big emotional fight with, and there's great stakes here because of his deep reverence for Yamamoto. First episode of the arc where this is happening, he lunges forwards, where's Yamamoto? But wouldn't it be much nicer to have Komamura with us in the cave looking for Yamamoto instead of somebody like Yoruichi, who has plenty of screen time and doesn't care particularly for Yamamoto? I think that would be much better. Yet he and Sasakibe Chodoro get taken out in episode 1, and the Zanpaktos are coincidentally friends. Even though we never see the two Soul Reapers interact, they're good friends, they understand each other even though Tenken is mute. It's just very convenient and very disappointing. And also with Chodoro, why did we get his Zanpakto spirit? We don't know anything about him. We know very little about his personality, but we get some. We know a lot more about Isane, and I personally really like Isane a lot more. So it'd be great to see Itegumo's Zanpakto spirit. And we even get Isane and Iba going around the Seirete, and they get attacked by neither of their own Zanpaktos because they're not in this arc, but Chojoro's is. They get attacked by Ashisogo Jiso, Mayuri's Zanpakto. The Reigai Arc also picked on Sajin, giving him less fights than his peers and pulling him out of the story in a targeted manner, but they still gave him a big fight with Komamura versus Reigai Soifone, and highlighted his care for Yamamoto. And also with Sasakibe's Zanpakto. If you first watch this arc, you are not going to know that this guy is his Zanpakto spirit. They don't really give off the same vibe. I don't think it really matches Chojoro that much, even though we don't know much about him. He has electric powers or something. When Zaraki killed off a Zanpakto spirit early, why wasn't it Chojoro's, who can't fight their master because they're already out of the fight? Why did it have to be Wabisuke? Another issue is Unohana's Zanpakto, Miyazuki. It's completely changed. We had that cool flying giant ray monster thing with the 2 feet. Now it's just sort of this mysterious robed figure. And it tries to be mysterious, but it doesn't do anything. It doesn't look interesting. And ends up being just forgettable and confusing. And while the other 2 senior captains, Ukitake and Shunsui, get detailed interaction with their spirits and is like a highlight of Zanpakto spirit interactions in my opinion, Unohana does not. This is okay as Kubo has mysteries around her. We don't know too much about her Zanpakto, like with Yamamoto and especially Zaraki's. but we do see a Shikai, and it's a manifested Shikai. It's not like Wabisuke, where we kind of have to come up with a design with the theme of like weight, guilt. We already had a physical design for a living being from her Shikai. Alright, here's some great things about the Zanpakto Rebellion arc. It's the first widescreen BLEACH arc and episodes, and it does very well with its new on-screen composition. Zanpakto Spirit's designs and unique personalities, their dynamics, they are so good. In fact, here's a tier list, and this point is huge, by the way. The Zanpakto Spirit designs are so good, most of them are incredibly appropriate. A little issues with Tenken being fire for some reason, I guess Komamura's reverence at Yamamoto. I already talked about Sasakibe's. Most of the other designs, Kazashini, Wabisuke, Suzumebachi, Zapimaru, and probably my favorite personality-wise out of all of them, Senpon Zakura Kageyoshi. Oh, it's so good for Byakuya's character. My next point is the mystery element at the beginning of the arc, and with Byakuya. It does add complexity and really draws you in. Another thing this arc does well is I feel like there's a lot of highlight fights in here. And there's also a lot of interesting battles and matchups, because we're not dealing with clones like the Reigai Arc, we're dealing with distinctly separate but connected entities to our favorite Soul Reaper characters in the form of Zanpakto spirits. The concept for this arc is excellent. The intro feels like a movie, it has such gravitas, the style, the lighting. It has an excellent high-quality intro episode. Despite my issues, there are still several great Ichigo/Zangetsu power dynamic fights very early on, which I feel like is a massive fan service for Ichigo. And I do really appreciate them, it's just I wish they had the details correct, their story in check. Maybe they do, and I'm just stupid. I know they go more into Ichigo's powers like a lot in the 1000-Year Blood War arc, because he has to figure them out or whatever. I've not seen it, so maybe this makes more sense retroactively, but for someone who has finished and watched up until the end of the original anime airing, the Fullbringer arc, this doesn't make any sense to me. And doesn't make any sense for the information we have when this arc was released either. But yet still, the fights are really cool, and it's great fan service. Rukia and Sodeno Shirayuki's relationship, such a good thing. It really successfully embodies the themes of this arc. Koga's backstory and the Kuchiki history is something that I don't think anybody was really expecting to see, but I think everybody's pleased about it, and we get to hear a little bit about a civil war in the Soul Society a while ago. And we get to see some Ginrei Kuchiki action, which is really cool. We also get some new Kido from Koga. We get to see Renji using Kido also in a new way, kind of like how he was doing it against Xylapalo Grans, but a little bit of a different spin here. And it's a very unique way of seeing Renji fight.
Ashisoki Jizo.
Ashisoko Jizo is so cute, and I love the noise he makes and the little video game sounds he makes.
You went too far!
I love him. I think the humor is good in this arc also. This arc also disarms Soul Reapers of their Shikai and Bankai, meaning there's more reliance on Kido, Hakudo, Ho-Ho, Zanjitsu/Kendo, so more kind of like basic techniques, which I think is really nice to see. He explores a theme with the ultimate antagonist, Koga, of relying on your Zanpakto in a healthy manner being key to success in battle. Harmony with yourself, which is important to Ichigo's powers especially, gives similar themes to Ichigo vs Kenpachi. It reinforces themes that are important for Bleach overall. We get some new locations also, we're not just seeing reused sets and areas. Like we get the lake where Koga is sealed, Muramasa's inner world, and the Rukongai lake where Hitsugaya fights Kyorimaru. The big cave system Yama is sealed in, and we get to see a lot more of Squad 6 barracks. I like how Tobiyume changes tone.
And at least I'm not the one calling him my little darling. I think you might need to get your brain checked. Muramasa, I haven't seen him. Good evening, my friend. I'm stronger on my own. I cannot continue to stay with someone as weak as you are.
She wants to appear as dignified and monotone to the Soul Reapers and her combatants and peers, but outside of battle with Hinako, she speaks far more emotionally and showcases her personality flaws.
Calling him my little darling. I cannot continue to stay with someone.
She tries to be a blank canvas, just switching up her tone immediately in battle. Muramasa's unseen tendrils being connected to reflections, I really like that, like in the water or in the glass of the skyscraper. Muramasa's name, coming from the legend of a cursed sword who possesses those who wield it to kill innocents. And then here's some points that I wanted to highlight, but I was uncertain whether they're like issues or great things. They're kind of just uncertainties I have about the arc. The first one is Koga's illusion powers, which are basically like Aizen. They're really overpowered, and he doesn't need a Zanpakto for it. Also, there's not too much info on the Civil War. It sounds very cool, but we barely get to see it. Ichigo's friend group, besides Rukia, have nothing to do for the first 90% of the arc. Ichigo's gang, even when they turn up, they don't have much to do, but this arc is focused on Zanpakto, so that's fair. The Sword Beast arc gives us more time with Zanpakto characterizations. In the Soul Society, Zabimaru was an animalistic monkey with a snake as a tail, voiced by Patrick Sayers and Vic Mignogia. Sorry about that. Zaraki's and Ikaku's voice actor respectively, although they both sound like Ikaku to me, so I don't know which one's doing what.
How long are you going to lie there?
Lazy scumbag. Now get out of that bed and get healed so we can fight again. I want to take on that Zangetsu one more time.
I guarantee
we're gonna win.
Either way, both male voices, animalistic monkey, and then in this arc, it's a woman with fur and a young boy with a snake aesthetic. He is shocked and asks why they are a woman now, but apparently he took up on Mayuri's offer to modify his Zanpakto spirit. What did Mayuri do it behind his back? Why are we talking about Zanpakto's sex? It's probably just a meta joke as they changed design philosophies. The Zanpakto spirits look different from their Shikai and Bankai manifestations, which is okay. Sometimes it's worse off, sometimes it's better. Like, Tenken isn't in samurai armor, and Ashiso Jiso is a small butterfly baby instead of a giant caterpillar, but can transform back into a caterpillar. Miyazuki is completely different, as I mentioned before. Muramasa seems to get a lot of his design inspirations from Ukiura being edgy, crying colors, and just being very emo. I like Muramasa, I really like Ukiura, but Muramasa, you can tell because Ukiura was really popular at the time. They took some inspiration off of him. Not bad, but it is a bit obvious. Okay, let's talk about the fights in the Zanpakto Rebellion arc. Overall, I have 4 categories I usually grade fights on. For this arc, I'd say overall, the animation is very good, the choreography is very good, the dialogue is good, the writing is hit or miss. There are 77 fights in this arc, stretched over 26 episodes. That is about 3 fights per episode. I have a system for ranking fights, and I ranked every fight in this arc. I ended up giving 0 S-tier fights. I gave 11 A-tier fights, and on the lower side, I did end up giving 3 E-tier fights, but I did not give any F-tier fights. My average fight rating for this arc is a 4.57. Just going to highlight some of my favorite fights and what I would consider the highlight fights of this arc, and there's a lot. Rukia and Ichigo versus Sodeno Shiayuki. We have White Zangetsu versus Old Man Zangetsu. Muramasa versus White Zangetsu. Ichigo versus Zangetsu. The second fight, Ikaku versus Hozukimaru, Hitsugaya versus Hyorimaru, Renji versus Byakuya in the barracks, and Zabimaru versus Zenbon Sakura. Muramasa and Rurijin Jaka versus Gote captains, Byakuya versus Koga, Ichigo versus Muramasa finale, and the best fights of those all is definitely Byakuya versus Koga and Zabimaru versus Zenbon Sakura. The fights I did not like, low light fights, were Tobiyume versus Hinako, Muramasa versus Hollow, fight 1 and 2, Zanpakto versus Stealth Squad, and Gote 13 plus Zanpakto Spirits versus the Hollows at the end. The worst fight for me was Tobiyume versus Hinako. And the first fight of the arc was really good with Byakuya versus Renji. There you go, that's everything I have for that arc. Let's go on to the Reigai Arc. My issues with the Reigai Arc is Oko and Kagerosa's origin is a bit hard to understand, especially on your first watch. It's easy to think it's stupid how powerful he is, and it is pretty crazy how strong he is, but there is a good explanation for it. It's easy to get fatigued by how many mirror matches there are in this arc. There's so much. I get battle fatigue when I watch this arc pretty much every time, at least at some point. The Reigai feel like cheap copies, literally, especially compared to the Zanpakto Rebellion arc, which had its mirror fights. So these types of fights aren't anything new. Instead of having 2 complementary characters fighting with similar powers, connected by a soul in a tragic rebellion, it's just clones with more strength and aggression. The concept feels like a less inspired rehash of the previous arc. The next point is Reigai have their own desires, which we don't know until the final episode, and it's not clearly explained whatsoever. They just do Kagerosa's bidding because he created them, until he starts blowing up the Soul Society. Then they turn against him because, quote unquote, he's a fellow mod soul who has gone out of control. We must protect the Soul Society in our own way. So they must still have some pride as Soul Reapers / mod soul hybrids, I guess. The plot twist that Kagorosa can revive defeated mod souls quite easily, as well as powering them up again. Kind of ridiculous, to the point you lose some suspension of disbelief on the powered up clones. Next is Nozomi's character is not compelling for most of her screen time. She only really hits her stride in the second half of the arc, otherwise she can be pretty obnoxious, and when I first watched her as a teenager, I thought she was really obnoxious. But in the end, we do care about her, and it's sort of the theme that she's worth caring about even before she becomes tolerable.
We found out. We weren't strong, nor were we weak. There was no hatred, no anger. Only that all this time we were just alone.
Me disliking her at the start, I'm part of the problem if this was real life, but this is a cartoon. I dislike her as a cartoon character, okay? It's different. It has one of the most annoying fights in Bleach with Hitsugaya versus two Momo Reigais. Two Reigai Momos. Oh yeah, and speaking of which, Kagorosa can not only just create an almost perfect clone that's more powerful than the original soul, but he can create more than one. Hitsugaya fights two Momos. Two Reigai Momos. Was there something stopping him making two Kenpachi Reigai? He managed to make a second one soon after the first one was destroyed pretty easily. Why just Momo? Next point is Reigais are essentially the same as the originals. The only difference is they're a little bit stronger than them physically and in terms of spiritual power, but they are more aggressive and their personality deteriorates when they continue to fight. That being said, while some fights they keep their minds, others do not. Many fights, particularly mirror fights, seem to be won by the original overpowering them. So the idea that we're sold on at the beginning of this arc is we can't just overpower them. They're exactly like us. The only thing that's different is they're more aggressive, so we can use that to exploit them. They can overextend, we can use sneaky tactics, we can use strategy to try and beat them. But a lot of the fights, no, the originals just overpower them when we're told that's impossible. We're just told that shouldn't make any sense, and it makes for less interesting fights because it's less on strategy and more on I'm feeling emotional, I'm more powerful now. Which makes sense for Orihime, but not really for a lot of the other characters, huh? The only ways to defeat Reigai should be A, if it's a mirror match, you need to outsmart them / letting their aggressive personality be their fall. B, if it's not a mirror match, you need to have a good matchup against them or outnumber them. Or C, have the original characters go through training or some sort of process which improves their fighting skills, or they can make a connection. Someone's at risk, they learn a new technique, they come up with something new in battle, like Renji and how he uses his Kido. These are done a few times, especially C, them coming up with a new technique or something, but a lot of the time they don't do any of these things and just win for no reason. Okay, let's get to the great things about this arc. Actually develops Kone's character. Unlike the Soul Society arc and the Arrancar saga, Kone is meaningfully in this arc. He's important to the theme, he develops his character. It makes me actually like Kone. If this arc didn't exist, I would be way colder on Kone. Really, it's the miscellaneous filler episodes and this arc that makes me like Kone. This arc houses one of the very top Bleach fights ever with Ichigo versus Oko. Somehow Ichigo loses his powers for a second time in the third act, and then recovering them doesn't feel forced. He does it in 2 stages. It doesn't feel forced. They did this really well. It's temporary. They have to use Kagorosa's technology against him by making a mod soul pill that will balance his Soul Reaper powers with his Hollow powers again. So it feels good despite it being yet another time he loses and regains his power. In this arc where we thought it would be about him losing it, he loses it, regains it, loses it again. Yet it feels good. There are plenty of characters who get spotlights and good fights. The focus again is on the Soul Reapers, but we love the Soul Reapers. I mentioned before, especially I appreciate Urahara being in this arc. We get to see a decent amount of Yamamoto, where in previous filler arcs the writers were shy to use him, as they were for many characters whose powers Kubo had been saving for later in the main story. We do get extended fights with Yamamoto and cool moments from him. It actually lets Komamura do something impressive, even if less so than for the other characters. He has a stalemate with Reigai Soifone. We get to see Unohana being involved, partaking in 2 minor fighting roles, which is nice. It handles Ichigo's powers very well, them fading and stuttering, as well as finding a way to seamlessly fit into the canon story, unlike the Bakoto and the Zanpakto Rebellion filler arcs. There's a theme of friendship and interdependency versus independency. Although overdone in general media overall, it's actually very relevant to the core of Bleach, and they execute on this theme better than they did in the Waco Mundo arc. The beginning of this arc transitions well from the melancholic aftermath of the Arrancar saga into an ominous atmosphere with a hidden threat in the Soul Society. The early parts of this arc also uses the idea of clones well, as some captains have been replaced and are living among the original captains who aren't certain but are suspecting something is off. We get a good variety of Kido in this arc also. Another point is characters do explore what drives and defines them when they meet their Reigai counterpart, but this is less fertile ground than the Zanpakto Rebellion arc. The animation is consistently high quality. It holds off on the first fight until episode 2 to focus on building tension and mystery, which I really appreciate in a show that does focus quite a lot on fights, and I focus on fights a lot too, but I appreciate it when there's an episode without a fight and it's still engaging. The gang has a barbecue and Uryu brings mushrooms. That's incredible. There's also good set locations. We get a lot in Karakura. We get a mountain forest, a shrine from movie 2, Diamond Dust Rebellion comes back, industrial plant, we get interior and exterior. We have a big public park in the third act, a SkyTrain track, a mountain tunnel, a construction site, other locations in the Soul Society that we don't get to see as often, like the research and development department interiors, that one room where the first Jokai crest was, where Chad and Ichigo fought Karia in the Bout arc. We get time in the Senzaiku, the tall building block in the middle of the Soul Society. We get to go back into the Maggot's Nest. I'm pretty sure this is the Maggot's Nest here. The bamboo forest in the Seirete, we've never seen that before. There's more, but these are the ones that we've only gotten to see once, twice, or never before. There's also a lot of scenes in the Dankai Precipice world. I really feel like the set locations here are excellent in this arc. I really appreciate, especially the ones in the world of the living. Those are the great things about this arc, and here's some things I was uncertain about. Just a couple things. First, the power of friendship trope. It is a strong theme in Bleach, they do it well, but it is a pretty generic trope to be one of the core parts of this arc. We have so many cool locations, unique locations in this arc, but it does end in another Sokyo Hill showdown. This one does make more sense than the Bout arc or Diamond Dust Rebellion at least. This arc has the benefit of the Hellverse OST, the soundtrack from Bleach Movie 4. Excellent, but it's just a benefit of this arc being later, so I didn't put it as a great thing about it. The other thing is the structure is fairly familiar, but it's not bad, but it would be nice if they mixed it up a little bit more. And for fights, out of the 4 categories I typically grade fights for, in the Reigai arc, I would say the animation overall is excellent. The choreography is really good, the dialogue is decent, and the writing is okay. There were only 48 fights over 25 episodes, which is just under 2 episodes per fight, so a lot less episodes per fight, but we do get a lot more non-fighting scenes, a lot more slice of life stuff. The average fight rating for this arc, I gave a 4.44, which is literally just slightly lower than the Zanpakto Rebellion. So this is 4.44 versus 4.57. Very minimal difference here. I did give 1 S tier fight in this arc, which the Zanpakto Rebellion arc didn't have. But as opposed to 11 A tiers, I only gave 4 A tier fights here. Similarly with the Zanpakto arc, I gave 3 E tiers and 0 F tiers. I'd say the highlight fights for the Reigai arc is Ichigo and Chad and Orihime versus Kagarosa round 1, Kenny versus Reigai Kenny, the Gote captains versus Kagarosa and Reigai, Yamamoto, Ichigo, Nozomi versus Kagarosa, and Ichigo plus the main squad versus Oko. The best fights by far. Excellent fight. The S tier fight is Ichigo plus main squad versus Oko, and the other best fight I would say would go to Gote captains versus Kagarosa and Reigai. The low light fights for me would be Nozomi versus Reigai Izuru and Nanao, Nozomi and Kon versus Reigai Rangiku, and Hisagaya versus the 2 Reigai Momos. The worst fight by far in this arc was definitely the Hitsugaya versus the 2 Reigai Momos. As for the first fight of the arc, like I said, the first episode doesn't have one, but in the second episode it would be Rukia Ichigo versus Reigai Renji and Ikaku. Nice animation, it's cool, it's smooth, it's a decent fight. So, the final roundup conclusion. My conclusion is the Zanpakto Rebellion arc is good, and the Reigai Arc is good. So after all of this long video, has my opinion changed? Which major filler arc is Bleach's best? Well, after years and years of these two arcs being joint at the hip in my mind, neither of one pulling ahead of the other, the best major filler arc in Bleach is the Bount arc. Good night!
Absolutely unacceptable! This is what I return to!